The story begins on a rainy day. There are several tents in the forest. A man comes out of one and swears at how cold it is. He said that it was bad, and it was raining really hard. He thought about how he wanted to collect empty cans, but there was nothing he could do. He wondered if the place had been evacuated already. It was raining hard all over the city. The man picked up a fairly large board and covered himself with it, hiding from the heavy rain. He exclaimed that he was already very wet. He asked this terrible thunderstorm to give him a break. In an instant, lightning struck the man. His cap flew off and fell to the floor. Passers-by started approaching and asking if he was okay. They shouted at others to call an ambulance quickly. The man couldn't move. He realized that he couldn't be saved. His thoughts began to get confused and his vision began to dim. The last thing he thought about was that he wanted to eat salmon sashimi one last time. Everything went dark before his eyes. After that, he opened his eyes and saw a brick ceiling. He hit hard and gasped, then was shocked to notice that he felt pain. He wondered where he had landed. He looked at his hands, trying to understand something. The man didn't know why he was there, because he didn't remember anything at all. Looking around, he tried to calm down and remember what had happened before. He leaned against the wall and began to sort through the memories he had. He remembered that his name was Tanaka Shinichi, and he was 56 years old. He had lived on the streets for about 10 years. The last thing he could remember was being struck by lightning in Shibuya. He smiled and said that he had done well after all. He didn't know why he was still alive after being struck by lightning, or why he was unharmed and full of energy, just like in his youth. He clenched his fist and thought that this was impossible unless he had been reborn. Suddenly, he turned pale at his own thought. He assumed that it could indeed be translated. Tanaka looked around and wondered where he was. This place was like a labyrinth. Suddenly, he noticed that he was extremely hungry. Suddenly, a soft squeak sounded right in front of him. He looked down and saw a small creature that was rocking quietly. He wondered what it was. Tanaka touched the creature and noticed that it looked like jelly. The man asked if it was possible that it was a land jellyfish. He tensed up because this world was different from his home. The man realized that this was most likely another world. He picked up the creature and said that it looked like a giant jelly or a gummy bear. While the creature was squeaking, he decided to try it and take a small bite. The creature was tasteless but very refreshing, like water. The soft texture went well with the minty aroma, and the spicy taste could be addictive. He said it was just perfect for dehydration. After he ate, he took a deep breath and said that he was full. After all, he wondered what kind of creature it was. From his little analysis, he came to the conclusion that it was slime. He was surprised to see such an inscription and wondered if this creature was called slime. He waved it off and then began to think about what kind of analysis this was. Suddenly, he saw another window like this. His name, Shinichi Tanaka, was written on it, as well as his age, which in this world was 25 years old. His race was that of a homeless person, and he had no magic. He didn't understand what kind of status this was. He looked at the window a little more, and then, noticing his age, he noted that this didn't seem very true. Tanaka sighed and thought that if there was a mirror it would be easier, but now he had the image of being reincarnated into the body of a 25-year-old boy. He stood up and walked straight down the corridor, thinking that it was time for him to look for an exit. Tanaka didn't know how much time had passed since then. He thought that he could have been there for about a month, but it could also have been a year. With a spear, he chased the wolf. He quickly defeated the animal and took it, saying that now he had food and that he should look for some bodies nearby. Suddenly, Tanaka saw the skeleton of a man sitting next to him. He thought it was almost his size. The guy took the clothes and was happy about it. From the analysis, he learned that he had found a mithril sword. Seeing this, the boy assumed that mithril was the name of the metal. This sword was indeed very good. As for where one could sleep in this labyrinth, Tanaka had long ago found the answer. He slept in the wall of this place. He used the pickaxe he got from the body to make a room. It was the safest place in the monster-filled area. He came in and said he was back, but no one could meet him there. With careful movements, he cut the meat, then, using 2 stones, lit a fire and set the meat to cook. He sat down and looked at his tasteless and tough meat. For now, meat could satisfy him, and he could live. He opened the window and thought he should check the status again, because he didn't even feel any changes. In any case, he was a little surprised that the homeless were a whole race. He didn't know much about this world, and he didn't have magic. He couldn't use it because he'd never seen it. Tanaka didn't understand anything because all his skills were technical. If he used the analysis skill, he would know the name of absolutely everything. Moreover, the more he used the skill, the stronger he became. It was thanks to them that he was still alive. He lay down on the floor and thought that he was hungry again. That food was not enough for him. Images of different foods started appearing in his head one after another. After that, he saw beautiful girls who were handing him a variety of delicious food. The guy felt hungry. He sat up and wondered what he was doing. He decided to give himself a massage. He took off his shoes and started massaging his foot. He was very tired, and his legs were the life of a homeless person. Suddenly, a notification appeared in front of him that he had received the skill Pain Point. He was very happy. He has only seen this message 3 times. The first time was detecting guest ops, and the second time was leg power. By repeating the action, he can gain the skill. Constantly avoiding enemies gives him guest op detection, and running gives him leg strength. Massaging his legs gives him Pain Point. He excitedly activated his new skill and ordered him to show his power. Suddenly, several dots appeared on his leg. He was surprised, after which he did not understand whether he had pressed. He saw only dots. Suddenly, a very strong pain ran through his entire leg, and he screamed. He started rolling on the floor, holding his leg. Suddenly, he realized that he had a feeling that he was even more tired than usual. If Tanaka used this on an enemy, he could paralyze them for 60 seconds. He sat down and thought that this was truly a useless skill. He knew it would be hard to defeat anyone with this. He had never lost to the local monsters, but still, 2 of them were stronger than him. The huge and ferocious boss of this zone, and also a humanoid monster. As for what it was, Tanaka decided to call it Jack. The monster was a dangerous opponent that you always had to be careful with. This monster could walk randomly throughout the labyrinth. Tanaka entered his lair and thought that he liked it there, when he suddenly felt danger. He saw a monster sitting in his room. It was Jack, without his left eye. Tanaka panicked, because the monster had found this place after all. He decided that he should run away before he was noticed, when suddenly he stepped on a blunt object that made a loud sound. Hearing this, Jack stood up and screamed loudly. Tanaka was very scared. He ran away from this monster as fast as he could, but Jack was chasing him. Tanaka was amazed at how persistent the monster was. He knew Jack wanted to eat him right there. He used the power of his legs, which allowed him to accelerate greatly and escape from the monster. After that, he sat down to rest and take a deep breath. He finally broke away. He didn't know how much longer he could survive, but the labyrinth was so confusing, and Tanaka still couldn't find a way out of it. He looked to the side and said that it was time to go into this unexplored area, because there must definitely be something useful there. Suddenly, he was surprised to see that the wall was glowing. Then, something else caught his attention. He saw the girl's body lying on the ground. Tanaka sighed and wished her peace. However, he had to admit that she was beautiful. He even felt sorry that such a beautiful girl had died. Suddenly, he noticed that she was snoring. Tanaka was very surprised when he noticed that she was alive. Tanaka, shocked, immediately began to wake the girl and say that this was not the best place to sleep. She opened her eyes and stretched. Suddenly, she was surprised and said something in another language. She immediately ran away from him, saying something. The guy introduced himself, then asked her name. She asked something, then said that her name was Elena Furidarius. He remembered her name, then asked if she was hungry. He said that if she wanted, she had some meat. He skillfully made a fire, then roasted meat on it, while Elena watched with appetite. Tanaka handed her the food, after which she happily ate. She handed Shinichi an object, and then asked if he could hear her and understand her. The guy tensed up and said that he understood. He was very surprised when the girl spoke fluent Japanese. Elena said it was translation magic. After that, she thanked him for the meat. Tanaka was a little surprised when he realized it was magic. The girl smiled and asked to introduce herself again. She said her name was Elena, and she was a magician. Tanaka said his name and thought about it. After that, Elena asked what Shinichi was doing in this place at all, and whether it was possible that he was working there. The guy was confused and asked what kind of work she was talking about, especially since he didn't know what kind of place it was. The girl said that this was the 19th level of the underground labyrinth of Mojito. She asked if he was an adventurer. Hearing this, Tanaka was very surprised. He got a little tense and asked what this labyrinth of Mojito was anyway. Elena replied that even she didn't know for sure about it, but people often said that it was ancient ruins. She said they would learn more if they went deeper. Tanaka thought about it and asked what about those monsters. Elena didn't quite understand him and said they were the same as on the surface. The boy asked her how he could leave this magnificent labyrinth. The girl said that the only way was to climb the stairs on each level. He remembered her words, then turned and thanked her as he prepared to go. He said he hoped they would meet again. She caught him abruptly and stopped him. She awkwardly said that in truth she had difficulties with how to get out of his place. Tanaka looked at her and asked if there were really scary monsters at every exit that she couldn't easily defeat. The girl fell to the floor and covered her face with her hands, saying that it was not so. She said that she had only recently started doing magic. He lowered it and realized that she was just learning. Elena was surprised by such a reaction. Shinichi said that in that case, she should explain to him more about what such a newbie was doing in such a place. She blushed and said that she just wanted to ask his permission to go with him. He was surprised that that was all. He readily agreed and she asked him if he was lying. Shinichi agreed and said that it would be safer to travel together. However, he had other thoughts, which made him blush at every thought of her beauty and movement. At every movement, he felt pleasure. He had no reason to leave. Suddenly, Shinichi asked why Elena had such unusual ears. She did not understand his question and said that it was normal for elves. Shinichi quickly realized that this was the first racial trait. Afterwards, they went to explore the labyrinth, when suddenly a trap appeared in front of them, from which a skeleton fell. Shinichi gasped and pulled away. Elena was amazed at how strong the guy was. He said that they weren't that scary once you started fighting them. Suddenly, the girl fell silent and pointed in a direction, saying that there were 3 sounds coming from there, and 6 more from another direction. She said to go where there were fewer sounds. Suddenly, Shinichi remembered and decided to ask if Elena had offensive magic. The girl said that she knew one spell, but it was quite weak. She supposed that it would even wait for them. She explained that she usually used support magic. Elena raised the staff, and small spheres appeared in the air. She asked if he could see them, as they were very bright. Shinichi agreed and asked her to stop, as the enemies might notice them. Elena smiled awkwardly and agreed, then said that she forgot herself. Suddenly, she became quiet, and the guy asked what was wrong. Elena said that someone was approaching, and that someone was breathing very heavily, as if running somewhere. Suddenly, Shinichi froze, looking behind the girl's back. Behind them was a huge orc with a bat, who was running towards them. Elena was very scared and screamed. Tanaka grabbed her hand and said that they had to run. The girl asked him to stop because he was going too fast and her legs were giving way. Before she could finish speaking, she suddenly fell. She told him not to worry and to run away because Shinichi had to survive. The guy immediately returned and stood up for her, saying that he refused to run away. Shinichi, holding a blade in one hand, rushed to attack and wounded the monster's hand. Jack growled. The guy tensed up because he barely scratched the monster. Elena asked why he didn't run away, because they were fighting an orc, and they were not equal in strength. Tanaka firmly said that they had not lost yet. He also added, asking her if it was not natural to want to save her friends. Hearing him call her a friend, she was taken aback. Tanaka quickly asked her if he could count on her help, to which she quickly agreed and said that he could rely on her. Elena raised her staff and aimed an electric paralysis at Jack. The monster screeched, and she said that the monster was stunned and that it was the best time to attack Tanaka. The boy rushed to attack, thinking that this was his chance to finish him off in one blow. Despite his plans, the monster slammed Shinichi into the wall with a loud screech. The guy rolled down and thought that it didn't seem to be very effective. At that time, the monster slowly approached Elena. The girl got scared and called Shinichi when suddenly the orc pulled her hard towards him and she screamed. The guy didn't know what to do, because at this rate, something bad could happen. He thought about it, because he knew for sure that there must be something he could do. A skill he could use for a pinpoint strike, and would it work? Shinichi knew there was no time to think, and that was all he had. He rushed and activated a pinpoint strike on the orc. After that, he pushed off the ground and stabbed the blade into that spot. Blood spurted out like a key. The monster screamed, then fell to the ground and died. Tanaka noticed that he couldn't move his arm, and it would be difficult to kill the monsters. The effect of the pinpoint strike also wore off very quickly. He turned and told Elena that they had no choice but to run. She agreed, and together, they ran through the labyrinth. The girl said that she could hear water beneath them, and they should check it out. He felt sorry for not being able to take the girl to the surface. She said that everything was fine, and they would definitely get out of there one day. At that moment, it was more important to get as far away as possible before the orc woke up. After some time, which the guys spent on the road and moving through the labyrinth, they came out to an open area where there were many large water sources. Tanaka lowered himself down and scooped up the water in his hands, then drank it. He gasped, saying how delicious it was. To his surprise, the water was really very clean. It was almost transparent, and it seemed to the guy that it even glowed. Elena slowly lowered herself and wondered if it was possible that this water was exactly what she thought it was. She carefully scooped up the water in her hands and drank quite a lot. At this time, Shinichi looked at her in bewilderment. Suddenly, the girl gasped and quickly raised her staff, summoning a burst of flame. Due to the lack of any effect, she wondered if it was possible that she had simply not drunk enough. Elena said that it was definitely her, and there was no doubt about it. Tanaka shouted at her to calm down, saying that she had probably had too much to drink. She began to tell him to let her go, because with this water she would become a great sorceress and learn many spells. Elena said that this is the so-called holy water, a mystical liquid. It keeps the monsters at bay and grants various blessings. Tanaka was confused by this information and did not quite believe in the magical water. He conducted an analysis and found out that it was indeed holy water, containing a huge amount of magical power. He quickly read the explanation after analyzing and realized that it appeared because his analysis skill had become stronger and had risen to the intermediate level. Shinichi said that he still felt that the water was special. Apparently, it could hold back monsters, and it would be a good idea to build a shelter near this water. He told the upset girl that it was time to go. She waved her staff again, then sighed in disappointment. Tanaka asked if they could go, as he wanted to see the outside world. He said that they should follow the water current. After a short walk, they saw that the stream ended in a wall. Elena assumed that it would be easy to get through. Suddenly, she noticed and pointed to a water source. There was a large fountain in the shape of a lion. Tanaka pressed the lion's eye and said that he had a strange feeling about that eye. Suddenly, he noticed a hole, which he pressed, and then a door appeared. Elena exclaimed that he was incredible, and she wondered how he noticed it. He said that he simply pressed the lion's eye. He suggested going in there. They were amazed to see a nice room. Elena was happy and said that she had never dared to think that such a place could exist in the giant labyrinth of Nohito. She asked if it was a dream. Shinichi looked in the mirror and realized that he looked exactly the same as he did in the distant past. He realized that he had been rejuvenated in the status menu, but it was true. He was rejuvenated and revived unchanged. He had already died once and was revived the same. It was a miracle that made Shinichi worry about him. Shinichi smiled and thought that he didn't know the reason, but he was given a new life. He was happy about the rebirth. Elena was fast asleep on the couch. Shinichi was looking around the house and suddenly noticed a device that looked like a stove. It is not based on mechanical principles and burning gas, but uses magic to cook. He is very hungry and needs to cook delicious food. Suddenly, Elena woke up, saying that it smelled delicious there. Shinichi said that she woke up perfectly for lunch. She asked if it was jerky soup. She asked to try some and then said it was disgusting. She had a feeling he was eating something similar and she doubted his taste buds. The guy said that meat just couldn't be that bad. Suddenly, he understood and said that it had to be salty, and if she wanted to add more, she should know that it was unhealthy. She said he was right, but that was not what she was talking about. Elena loudly asked why he was only cooking meat, and he had no right to call it cooking. It was just broth. She told him to step aside and let her cook the food. She ground the spices and then poured them into the broth. Then she finally chopped the vegetables and left them to boil. After a while, she made a soup of dried meat and vegetables. The guy carefully tasted the dish, after which he was genuinely amazed. The salt gently coated his tongue, combining the taste with spicy black pepper, leaving a pleasant aftertaste, and the vegetables took the taste to a new level. He understood what cooking was. He was genuinely happy. Elena asked what was wrong with his face and if he was really okay. He said it was all good. It was great. It was great. He ate and ate, praising the food, and then asked for more. The girl said that there was no more, and they only had 4 portions, and that was enough for them. He was surprised when he realized that they had eaten everything. Elena said that if he liked the soup so much, she could make some more. He was surprised and asked if she was serious. Elena asked him not to grab her shoulders because he was too close. She lay down on the sofa, thinking about what problems he had. She wanted to get some sleep. Shinichi thought that the current goal was to escape from the dungeon, and the main goal was to ensure a peaceful life. In order to live in this parallel universe, he needed to think of something to do outside. He jumped up and clenched his fist, thinking that his body had become lighter. Suddenly, he noticed that he had incredible muscles. He asked Elena what she thought. He was very happy. Elena jumped up and asked why he was screaming, because she couldn't sleep peacefully because of him. She sighed and asked what he was doing in front of the mirror. The guy exclaimed that these were blows of joy. He told her to look at how much weight his body had gained. She said he shouldn't show her. Elena told him to put on some clothes, when suddenly she noticed that she had grown too. Shinichi guessed that it might be the effect of the holy water. It was just Shinichi's guess that the water was transferring previous experiences to the body. The boy defeated the orc, and perhaps that is why he is bigger than Elena. He agreed. The girl sat back down and said that this was the result she'd hoped for. If you think about it, it's not so bad. Shinichi assumed that their status had changed as well. He decided to use the analysis on Elena. The results showed that she was an elf of 19 years old. She is the second daughter of the Fredria family and has difficulty learning magic. He was surprised that she was only 19. The girl said that she would like to live here and wondered if anyone had lived there before them. Shinichi said that they would have to figure that out later. He didn't understand why there was no bathroom or bedroom. He could guess something, so he moved the closet. Another door appeared behind him. Elena was surprised by another secret door. The guy said that for there to be another secret door inside the secret room, there had to be someone living there who hid very well. He wondered who wanted to live in this dangerous 20-story labyrinth, but it was a complete mystery. There, Elena admiringly noticed a bed. There was also a toilet that worked properly. They also found a storage room. The girl said that this is the reason why the secret house belongs to Moore. Shinichi was leafing through his notes at the same time. Suddenly, he saw something interesting. He laughed loudly and said that it must be a joke. He had found a real map of this labyrinth. Elena was shocked by the sudden change in the guy's mood and asked what was wrong with him. Shinichi smiled widely and said that he had found a map of the labyrinth. It was with its help that they would be able to get to the surface. The girl exclaimed that she had already understood and he could move away from her. He was surprised and asked what was wrong, because she had noticeably blushed. She asked, "I wonder who it was because of." After that, they continued exploring the labyrinth. Shinichi quickly dealt with the light monsters and got rid of the traps. After that, he asked if it was true that there was a field on the 21st floor. She confirmed it, saying that there could be no mistake. In that case, they might run out of food if they win from there. Moore was definitely self-sufficient, so they'll have to look further. Suddenly, on the way, Elena asked the guy with interest where he was from. She noticed that he spoke a different language and knew almost nothing about this place. Shinichi confidently said that he came from another place that she probably hadn't heard of. Elena was a little surprised that there was something she didn't know. She said that it sounded very interesting. She smiled and said that, by the way, she works as an adventurer. The girl receives a reward for killing monsters and demons, but she is nevertheless a freelance adventurer who specializes in carrying luggage. Shinichi smiled and said that if qualifications and skills were not required, then becoming an adventurer was indeed a very good idea. Elena smiled, then suggested that the boy join forces. She said that Shinichi could fight hand-to-hand, and she would support him with long-range attacks. The girl was sure that she would definitely succeed. Shinichi blushed and looked away, after which he quickly agreed and asked her not to push. He said that since they were together, then they would definitely be able to do absolutely everything in their power. Elena hugged him tightly and said that at least she had a friend. She sincerely thanked Shinichi for this. The guy blushed and was taken aback by her actions. After a while, they finally reached the stairs. Elena said that she was tired, so she suggested that they rest, and if they went down, the monsters would definitely become stronger. Shinichi told her not to be stupid, because they needed food. They would have soup with regular salt for breakfast tomorrow. Afterwards, he asked her if she had rested and if she was scared. Elena said that it was not something she would be scared of. She admitted that she just desperately wanted to live. Together, they went out and froze. The boys saw a large forest landscape in front of them, so they didn't know if it was really still a labyrinth in front of them. While the boys were looking around, Shinichi noticed something funny. He said that he wondered if the fruits in this place were edible. Elena didn't know the answer to this question because she had never even seen such plants. Shinichi deftly climbed the tree and picked one fruit. He took a bite, and then began eating them one by one with great appetite. He looked at Elena and said that they were probably poisonous, so she had better not eat them. The girl angrily exclaimed that he was a liar because he ate these fruits with such appetite. She nevertheless tried the fruit and said with satisfaction that they were sweet and very tasty. It was a peach. The analysis said it was the fruit of a so-called phantom tree, which obviously raised a lot of questions in Shinichi. Elena assumed that Moore had planted it. Shinichi made his way through the tall greenery to another fruit, this one underground, with only a huge tail sticking out. Shinichi pulled the product from the ground with all his might, and then laughed loudly when he saw that it was daikon. Elena was amazed by this magnificent daikon and then asked where it grew. Shinichi pointed to the place where he had pulled out the fruit and said that he had simply collected some grass and that it was daikon. The girl did not quite understand what he was talking about, since this plant is called daikon. Shinichi read the description and was surprised because he was sure that it was daikon. Afterwards, he dug up several more of the same and said that it was an incredibly pleasant coincidence, because now it could provide them with food. It would be a mistake to keep an eye on the planting all the time, and there were monsters there too. He said that Elena was right, and so they would make their own field in this place, where they would plant vegetables. He said they could live on it. Elena smiled and said it was a good idea because they could build a fence and prepare the field better. Shinichi fully understood that this field would not feed the two of them, but it was a great start. They would start here, and if they chose to leave, this place would be the starting point. The guy said that right now they had a small problem: monsters. They needed to check the surrounding area for monsters, and they should start with the forest. Hearing this, Elena immediately refused. The boy smiled and said that he thought it was hard for a useless rookie mage. She was very angry that he called her useless, so she said that she would show him the true power of a rookie first-class mage. After these words, she immediately turned around and went into the forest. Shinichi thought that she was first-class only when her pride as a sorceress was hurt. Elena bent down to pick something up from the ground. She turned and called out to Shinichi, telling him to come closer and take a look at her find. The guy was very surprised by the huge number of mushrooms that Elena found. The girl said with a smile that these were medicinal mushrooms, high-level mushrooms that, according to rumors, can heal a wound instantly. She said that Moore himself must have raised them. The girl said that if they sold them, she could buy a whole bunch of her favorite clothes. Shinichi looked at her and said that she seemed to have forgotten that they were still inside. Suddenly, she gasped, realizing that this was indeed the case. The guy pulled her along, saying that it was time for them to go. She looked at her healing mushrooms with tears in her eyes. They also saw an incredibly huge tree. Shinichi guessed that it was already 1,000 years old. Elena noticed that it seemed to still be alive because there were fruits hanging on it. Shinichi climbed the tree and read the analysis of the fruits. They could enhance the senses for an hour. The guy said it was cool. He picked the fruit and thought that it didn't matter how he looked at it because the color and shape were familiar to him. When he peeled off the peel, he saw that it was an ordinary orange. Elena came up and told him not to take everything because she wanted some too. She tried it and said that she liked it better than the peach. The fruit was refreshing. Suddenly, Shinichi froze. The spell of the five senses: sight, taste, hearing, smell, touch. It was as if his consciousness had expanded beyond the small garden. He could feel the breath of all living things in the forest. It was as if he had super senses. Elena said it was an unusual sensation. Suddenly, she froze. Shinichi called out to her, and she noted that she too had sensed that they were surrounded. Judging by their breathing, they realized that there were about 20 enemies. Running away didn't seem wise. They were kobolds. Shinichi told the girl about the name of the monsters. Elena said that she knew because she had met them before. She said it was more important to focus on attacking now. The boy raised his sword when Elena said she would stop them for a moment. She told him to try to kill as many as he could during that time. He agreed, and she shouted at him to close his eyes. She used a blinding flash, after which Shinichi rushed forward and began to kill the monsters one by one. He screamed loudly as he continued to run forward, blood spraying from all sides as the monsters fell to the ground. After a while, Shinichi thrust his weapon into the monster and said that it was the last one. He said that his body was very light, and he could defeat even more enemies. Suddenly, they heard a growl. Together, they turned to see a new kind of kobold that had evolved due to the mutation. Shinichi asked what it was, as Elena exclaimed that it was coming. The monster caught Shinichi's sword. The guy was weaker and couldn't resist much. Elena used a fireball. This gave Shinichi the opportunity to retreat. The girl told him to be careful, because this was not an ordinary kobold. The guy exclaimed that he already understood it himself. Suddenly, a powerful spell hit him. He fell to the ground and asked if the monster was using magic. He rushed to attack, but Elena used a blinding flash. Shinichi exclaimed that he could not see anything. The girl led him to the side and told him to hurry. They returned to the labyrinth, and Shinichi realized that he had weakened his defenses. He had been overconfident due to his body's strength and his success with the sword. After defeating a bunch of kobolds, he had become too arrogant, and he paid for it. Elena scolded him harshly and asked him if he didn't know that monsters could use magic. Moreover, he caught a firebomb. It was a miracle that he survived. He asked what kind of bomb it was. The girl said it was a mid-level fire magic skill, but it was enough to kill Shinichi. Tanaka apologized and said that if it weren't for her, he would have died. She agreed and asked if he was glad he hadn't forgotten the aspiring sorceress. He agreed and thanked her for saving him. She agreed and said that they were friends. He smiled, thinking that he had to do more to win her trust. Shinichi said that he was counting on her from now on. She asked why. Elena said that she was looking forward to working together. Suddenly, she remembered something. She took out a healing mushroom and put it in the guy's mouth. His wounds healed right after that. He said that this thing was great. Elena agreed, saying that she hoped she could sell them and buy clothes, but until they got out, she would have to use them. The boy leaned against the wall and said that they had had enough adventures today and should return to the secret house. Suddenly, the wall behind him turned around. Elena caught him and flew after him. He called her and she used lighting magic. They ended up in a weird position and she kicked him. She doubted that this place was on Moore's map. He said there was no choice but to move on. Suddenly, they turned pale. In front of them was a whole mountain of dead bodies and skeletons. He said that they were still not decomposed. Suddenly, they saw an object that throws corpses there. Elena had heard about the disappearance of bodies in the dungeon, and now she saw the reason. She couldn't believe that the dungeon itself was collecting bodies. Shinichi asked if it does a labyrinth. She said that monsters don't do that, and she doesn't know how it works, but it should be convenient for a dungeon. The guy understood and went down. Elena asked him what he was doing. He said it could be called cleaning. He did it because there were a lot of useful things on them. She told him not to touch anything and not to rob the dead, because it was a disgrace. He said they would take a few things. He said that the bodies even smile and allow them. She said that he was lying. Shinichi noticed that there were many things that they did not have. If their goal was to get out of there, this was no time to argue about morality. She couldn't answer him. They began searching. They found many useful things, and their bag was full. They also had salt and sugar, as well as coffee and spices. They even found the dried meat and bread that Elena wanted. The guy folded his arms, and she asked him what he was doing. He was paying respects. Where he came from, that's what they do to pay for the dead. She said she'd do it after him. They humbly accepted the property of the deceased, and did not want to disturb their peace in any way. They are grateful with all their hearts for their help. Thanks to them, they can survive. Elena said that she was tired and hungry, so they should hurry home. Shinichi thought that they could call that place that now. He felt the warmth of a very distant past. The girl with dark hair told the child to hurry up because they were late. He agreed. The girl kissed Shinichi, and he asked her what was wrong since she was so active. He asked if she was the one who scolded him today. She called him names and said he wouldn't see them for 3 days. He remembered that he and the child were going to visit her parents. He was sorry that he couldn't go because of work, so he asked her to convey his apologies. She agreed and said that there was lunch in a refrigerator. She told him not to forget to close the door. The boy approached Shinichi, and the man told him not to cause trouble for his mother. He smiled and agreed. The guy said that he was the child's real father, and he could call him Dad. The child called him Shinichi. The girl asked Naoki what he was doing, since they had no time. They said goodbye to Shinichi. A winter day when the boy was 35 years old. Another day, typical for the Tanaka family. At the hospital, he thought it was a lie, and they were wrong. He hoped so. He entered the room and saw bodies covered with cloth. Shinichi called Miyuki. The girl said that they had been in a car accident. By the time they arrived at the hospital, they were dead. Shinichi's world collapsed. He was lying on the bed, his face still stern. He got up from the bed and started making a fence. The guy said everything was ready. Luckily, they found a hammer and a saw in the storeroom of the house, for which they were grateful to Moore. Elena screamed for Shinichi to help her while the chickens were chasing her. He thought about how helpless she was. He quickly killed the animals. She thanked him, and Shinichi asked why they attacked. The girl said that they had a nest near a peach tree. The guy said that she should do some work instead of stealing. He said that he was very hungry, and she asked him to wait while she cooked breakfast. He apologized for making her. He was thinking of picking herbs while she cooked. They had learned a few things this week. The plants in the labyrinth do not need watering, and they ripen quickly. They did not know the reasons, but in a week the seeds became flowers and will soon bear fruit. Because of this, their supplies are slowly increasing. Elena prepared breakfast and called Shinichi. They ate delicious sandwiches. He said she should have been a cook instead of a sorceress. She got angry. Shinichi asked why she chose the dangerous job of an adventurer. She didn't pass on her dreams. Even as a child, she wanted to become a sorceress, so it was natural for her. Adventurer is a shortcut for a mage. Great wizards are the strongest mages. He asked if she wanted her power and name to be known to the world. She said she had more hope for him as a partner. He was already worried about the responsibility. The girl said that the place was comfortable and they should go on a picnic sometimes. He said that they had one every day. She noted that she was not talking about the plantation, but about the opportunity to go out into the field to relax and eat. He said they could go if they had a chance. There were no new corpses and they should search below. He found a useful blade. Suddenly, he saw a cloth. He asked if Elena could lower the cloth with magic. She said she could land it, and it would be easier to aim from the top. She climbed up and used fireball. It hit, but the cloth didn't fall. He asked why. She tried again, but it didn't work. The magic is gone. She said it's impossible. There is equipment that reduces damage but does not nullify it. He threw things at her, wanting to throw the fabric off. She asked him why. Suddenly, he hit Elena with something. She was angry. He threw something else and hit it. It was a robe that Shinichi couldn't analyze. The system said the owner was dead. The system asked Shinichi if he wanted to take it. He agreed and said that he had received an incredible item. Elena asked what it was, after which he said it was a magical object she had never heard of. He asked what it was. The girl explained that these were things created by wizards. This is the term they use to describe unusual things, like the slab from the secret house. He said it was cool. Elena said he had no sense of taste. At home, she tried to use a firebomb, but it didn't work. She still couldn't use mid-level spells, and she doubted she would ever stop being a beginner. He told her to calm down, because the important thing was that she was trying to practice on him. She said that when she was taking a shower, he was peeking. He said he would be her target practice whenever he wanted. He asked if they should go to the forest. She said she wasn't against exploring, but she wasn't planning on fighting that kobold. He said there was no need to worry. He had learned new skills. He also had a couple of secret weapons prepared. He had a good feeling that he wouldn't lose. Elena asked what kind of weapons. There was a temple near the forest, and they needed to find it. Shinichi was cutting away tall grass with his sword. The girl asked him how he did it. He said it was his secret weapon, the magic sword technique. He carefully approached its creation, and after a couple of days he succeeded. He made a hole in the handle of the sword and placed a magic stone in it. Now the air stone is installed, but he could change it to another element. She said that the magic weapon is difficult to create, and a beginner could not do it in 2 days. But Shinichi did, and Elena was shocked. He said that they were on the border of kobold territory, and they had to be careful. She said there were still a lot of mushrooms there. Shinichi saw a red mushroom and tried it. He said his tongue tingled a little. Elena showed a bunch of mushrooms she had picked. The guy asked if they could make stewed mushrooms. She said they needed to pick more herbs. The boy found an imogen, which was wormwood. They also found a warren bee, which was a bracken. Shinichi said to put the wormwood and salt in boiling water for a minute, then remove the rest. The bracken needs to be freed from hairs and sprinkled with wood ash and salt. Then put it in water, and when it sinks to the bottom, wait for it to cool down, and then eat it. He learned this from his grandparents, who lived in the mountains. They often taught him how to cook wild plants. On his way home, he would kill chickens and rabbits for meat. Suddenly, Elena heard something. It was the sound of a kobold and a child. They ran there. The boy was screaming in the tree while the kobold was below. Elena used an attack spell, and Shinichi used a blade. The monster dodged. Shinichi took out his second weapon, a bolas. Elena was surprised. He threw it at the kobold, and the monster started spinning him. Elena asked Shinichi to do something. He lunged and injured him, but they failed. Shinichi called Elena, and they used electric paralysis. They had to be fast. The boy used the lightning stone and pinpoint strike. He threw the blade and hit the target. The cobalt is vulnerable because of the skill, and Shinichi could kill him now, otherwise he will become stronger later. This was the last chance. He rushed towards the monster, but the cobalt used magic. Shinichi did not feel pain and decided to put all his strength. He attacked the monster, after which the cobalt fell to the ground dead. Somehow they won. Shinichi did not understand why he did not receive any injuries from magic. He assumed it was because of the robe. Elena approached the child and said that he was injured, so she handed him a mushroom. Shinichi was surprised that it was a boy. He said it was close. He asked if he could talk. He did the analysis and found out that it was a holy beast werewolf. He was born as a kobold's son and was abandoned since then, wandering around as an orphan. It was unclear what Shinichi saw in those innocent eyes. After reading the analysis, Shinichi asked Elena if she knew anything about sacred beasts. Holy creatures can be allies of humans. Elena had heard that some countries worship them as gods. Shinichi looked at the boy and saw his son in him. He apologized and said that they were passing by and saved him. He said that they were not the boy's friends. Shinichi said that it was time for him and Elena to go. They noticed a variety of mushrooms. Elena showed different mushrooms and named them. Shinichi picked one and thought it might be matsutake. It was a poisonous mushroom. Shinichi asked if Elena lived in the mountains, since she knew so much about them. Elena was born in a country covered with forests. In another country, this labyrinth is located. He asked what her homeland was called. The Kingdom of Rogus, a small state mostly populated by humans. She was curious about where Shinichi came from, since he didn't know about the Rogus kingdom and said nonsense things. He stated that it was his phrase. He thought she wouldn't understand his words about reincarnation. Elena said that they would soon arrive at the temple. Suddenly, a cobalt jumped out from behind her. He tried to attack her. Suddenly, the boy jumped out and killed the monster. He sat down next to him. Shinichi noticed that the child was too thin and probably undernourished. He handed him a Burma fruit, but the boy couldn't eat it. The boy handed him some dried meat, and the boy began to eat. Elena asked him if he liked them. She asked what they should do with the baby. Shinichi said they would take him with them. With proper nutrition, he would become a decent man. Shinichi was worried about their supplies, but they couldn't ration or find any other solution. Elena asked about the baby's name. She said that they should give him a name since he would be with them. Shinichi thought about it and said that they would call him Liz. Elena said that he had no taste. They arrived at the temple. Shinichi noticed something and asked if it was a structure or a monument. Elena had seen similar structures, but she couldn't remember where. He used the analysis. It was written on the slab that it was a temple of transference. Since Shinichi does not know the transference points, it is not available. He was surprised by the possibility of teleportation. Elena said she remembered and that building was similar to the one at the entrance to the labyrinth. Shinichi asked if that meant the other temple was on the surface. She agreed and said she didn't know who built it, but it was a long time ago. He held out his hand and noticed that nothing had changed. He wasn't sure, but the system had been in sleep mode up until now, but they didn't have any movement points, so all they could do was fight their way up on their own. He asked if she thought they could get out. She suggested it was possible. It would be tough with their food supply. But they wouldn't get lost, thanks to the map, but it would take at least 2 days. They needed to increase their supplies and make sure they had enough for their escape. Elena prepared the dish and covered it with a lid. She asked if Liz was still asleep. Shinichi confirmed it and said that he was in a weak condition as he was very tired from the battle. The girl noticed that something was stuck in the child's mouth and asked Shinichi to analyze it. He saw that it was a red mushroom. He thought that it might be because of his mistake. Liz saw Shinichi eating a red mushroom, and when they were attacked by a kobold, he was under the influence of poison. He asked what they could do about the poisoning. Elena said it was simple and she would cure him with magic. Shinichi praised her. She used poison removal, and Liz spat something out. It was a drop of poison, and almost all of it was removed. Shinichi didn't think eating poisonous mushrooms would lead to this. As someone living on the street, he had to warn him carefully. He asked if the red mushrooms were a slow-acting poison. Elena didn't think so, because the symptoms manifest themselves instantly. Shinichi knew that they were edible. The guys made soup, and Liz rushed to the food. Shinichi stopped him, and they sat down to eat. Liz quickly tried it, but got burned. Shinichi showed the boy how to eat. He just smiled widely. Shinichi asked why Elena didn't teach him how to talk. She asked why Shinichi didn't do it, since he was better suited for it. She suggested making a deal. Once they got out, he would buy her a set of clothes in the city. He said that if everything was okay, he would agree. She smiled and approached Liz. Suddenly, she was surprised and asked about the boy's clothes. Shinichi had forgotten about it. They didn't have any children's clothes, and all the clothes in the area with the bodies were for adults. Elena said that she once worked part-time in a tailor shop, and she had a needle from a dump. She could sew the set right then and there. After a while, the boy was wearing clothes that suited him very well. Next, she needed to make shoes, but Elena didn't know how to do that. Shinichi said they could look for small shoes at the dump. A couple of days later, Liz happily said that he had already finished tearing up the grass. Shinichi thanked the boy. Slowly but surely, he spoke better. It was great progress. Elena exclaimed that she had succeeded. She showed that she had caught a chicken rabbit. Shinichi and Liz praised the girl. Elena said she aimed her fins at the chicken and used electric paralysis to immobilize it. She would never have thought she could do it. Elena also slowly progressed. She improved her physical skills. More importantly, she had become better at controlling her magic. They still didn't have enough food for 3 people. Shinichi said he would go hunting next time. Suddenly, he was surprised to see a tiger bison, which was a carnivorous bison. He used his magic sword and killed the monster. Elena said that he did it in 1 hit, as expected of him. Liz exclaimed that Shinichi was incredible. The boy came up and started looking at what they had. He asked Liz if he liked watching, and the boy agreed, because he was having fun. Elena approached them, after which she said with disgust that they both should wash. Shinichi said that there could not have been a more appropriate occasion. The bath was almost ready. He set up the fire magic spheres, and together with Liz, they began to bathe in the bath. Elena said she was amazed at Shinichi's resourcefulness. The guy said it was called a bath, and it was great. Elena said she might try it later too. Liz splashed Shinichi with water, and after that they started splashing each other with water. After a while, they gathered their gear and got ready to go out. 2 months have passed since Shinichi's rebirth. It's finally time to get to the surface. Elena said it was time to go through almost 20 floors. Shinichi agreed, and Liz asked what the surface was. Elena said it was a bright and huge space. There are many living creatures and mountains of delicious things. Liz was happy and said that he wanted to eat meat. Shinichi said that he wanted to look at meat dishes. They would soon reach the 19th floor. He told the others to eat a barma fruit. The boys entered and noticed that it was too quiet. Suddenly, Liz noticed something approaching. It was the wolves. He exclaimed that he could handle it and the boys should leave the monsters to him. Liz quickly and deftly got rid of the monsters, one by one, until there were none left. The boys were surprised by this and said that Liz had the strength of 100 men. Shinichi asked if they were on the right track. The girls said that Moore's map could not be wrong. Suddenly, Liz screamed. There was an orc with a pig's head in the corridor. It was Jack. He was shouting loudly and walking towards the guys. Elena said about the 19th floor. Shinichi said that he hadn't seen Jack for a long time. He asked the others to stand behind him, and he went forward. Jack picked up the bat and went to attack. Shinichi used the strength of his legs and instantly appeared behind the monster. He swung his sword and killed the monster. Elena said it was incredible. Liz agreed. Shinichi thought that the once formidable opponent was no longer him. He turned to the others and said that they should now go up the stairs. Shinichi cut off a small piece of meat, and Elena ran up to him asking what he was doing. He asked what she was talking about as he quickly cut off a piece. Elena exclaimed that an orc is not food, just as he did not eat a cobalt, so humanoid monsters should not be eaten either. Shinichi said that he did not eat because he loves dogs. He would eat an orc with much greater pleasure. Elena fell silent. Suddenly, Shinichi had a new skill selection. He asked what it was. He asked Elena if she knew what this skill selection was. The girl said in surprise that she was hearing about it for the first time, and therefore did not know if it was a skill. He decided to use it on Elena. It didn't work, and he became interested in understanding it more, but now it won't work. He sighed and said they shouldn't worry about it. Liz was happy with the meat. Elena quietly said she wouldn't eat it. After a while, they ate and were about to leave. Suddenly, Elena turned around and saw a real treasure chest. She thought they didn't seem to notice. She smiled and walked up to him, thinking that it would all be hers. Suddenly, the chest opened and huge teeth bit into Elena's leg. She screamed loudly. Shinichi turned around and asked what happened. Elena sat on the floor and plaintively asked Shinichi to save her from this. The guy came up and looked with interest at the monster in the form of a treasure chest. Elena exclaimed that it was a mimic. It disguises itself as a chest and attacks people. Shinichi said that it happened because she was blinded by greed. Elena exclaimed that she already understood, so he should just help her. She explained that there was a weak spot on the monster's back that Shinichi needed to pierce with his sword. He quickly thrust his sword in and asked if he had done it right. The monster fell to the ground and Elena sighed, saying that she had already thought that she would lose her leg. Liz came up and handed the girl a medicinal mushroom. Elena thanked him for it. Shinichi asked if the monster's weak point was on its back. He assumed that monsters had special features and weak points. Elena remembered and asked if Shinichi had used that skill on monsters. The guy said he hadn't tried it yet. Elena noticed that she was injured. Shinichi used the new skill on the monster and saw that he could get the skill he wanted to take from Mimic. He froze, thinking that he was very stupid. Exactly as it was said, it selects a skill for him, but the target must be dead. That's why it didn't work on Elena. He said it was amazing, because with this skill, he could get skills from corpses. Elena was shocked. She said it was against the rules and he was a criminal. He already thought she would say that, so he said it would be their secret. He went down, and Elena asked what he was doing. He explained that he was taking the heart and liver. She asked if he ate anything like that. Shinichi asked if she wanted to try it and handed her a piece. She refused. The boys ate it, and Elena tried it anyway. It was delicious. On the 19th floor, Shinichi said that this scouting skill he got from mimicry is very useful. Liz said that something scary is coming. The monster chased the three adventurers. Shinichi said they had to do it. Elena agreed. She used electric paralysis. Shinichi went on the attack, but Erna's magic had no effect. He told Elena that he needed her help, and he had to do something with the earth. He changed the stone, and said that if it was ice, everything would be fine. The adventurers were surprised by the magical weapon. Shinichi created a storm, after which Liz attacked the monster. Shinichi said that the boy saved him. The adventurers were amazed by Liz's power. Shinichi changed the stone again, and raised the stone again, and raised the sword. He said that it seemed to be effective since it was an ice attribute insect. En turned to the guys and said that he needed their help. Elena threw fireballs at the monster, and Liz hit the monster on the head. Shinichi followed, plunging his sword into the monster's body. He used his signature fire and burned the enemy to the ground. The guys happily said they did it. Elena asked what kind of signature fire it was. The guy said it was his signature move. Afterwards, Elena asked him to stop because she had a headache. Shinichi used the skill transfer and noticed that the new ability would be very useful in battle. The adventurers were amazed and said that it was impossible. The guys were able to defeat such a strong monster. One of them said that this man has good skills. The third girl told her friends that they were four. They were to thank the rescuers. The adventurers bowed, after which they introduced themselves one by one. Mike, the leader of the Loris group, was there. Annie and Coco were there too. Shinichi said that they had angered the monster well. He thought that this monster was the kind that liked to chase its prey to the end. Mike said that it was his fault because he hit the monster on the head when he saw it. He thought they could win, but his sword broke, Annie's magic was ineffective due to the wrong attribute, and Coco couldn't help because she couldn't stand such enemies. Mike was glad the boys were there. Annie said it was no time to laugh since his sword was broken and there was no way they could get to the surface in this condition. Shinichi suggested that they go together. It wouldn't be a problem since they were going to the same place. Mike asked if it was possible and they would appreciate it. Shinichi asked Elena why she was hiding. Annie told Elena that they knew she was there. Mike asked what would happen if it wasn't her. She came out and Mike said that despite her appearance, she was still alive. Elena got angry and suggested making the word trash taboo. Annie came over and said that it would be more important to hear Elena's explanation of why she took the assignment without telling the girl. Elena hesitated and said that she thought the reward was good and didn't seem too dangerous. She asked if that was bad. Annie said it was bad because Elena had been missing for a month. However, she was glad that Elena was okay because she had been very worried. Elena called Annie her sister, and Shinichi was surprised. He couldn't imagine that they were blood relatives. He wondered about their relationship. Annie asked if Elena was the only one who survived. She admitted that they were also investigating the Dawn Rat case, and they wanted to confirm if there were any survivors. Elena fell silent, then remembered all the horrors she had seen that day. Annie said that she understood everything, and therefore she would report to the guild that only one person survived. Annie turned to Mike and asked how much longer he planned to remain on the ground. She ordered him to get up. At this time, Liz called Shinichi and said that it was very tasty. The guy also tried it and said that it was really tasty. It reminded him of a crab. His behavior scared the others. Together, the boys moved further and further through the labyrinth and were already able to reach the 5th floor. Shinichi walked ahead while Elena was behind him. Suddenly, a small insect, a spider, fell on her chest. She screamed loudly and turned away. Shinichi turned around in surprise and asked what happened. Elena turned pale and froze. She loudly exclaimed that there was a spider sitting on her chest. Shinichi came up and looked closely at the small insect. The guy was close enough that Elena blushed visibly. Shinichi asked if she was talking about that little spider. Elena covered herself with her hand, then hit Shinichi in the face with all her strength, saying that he was too close. He was taken aback and took the blow to the face. Tanaka made an assessment and learned that it was a solid, large, poisonous spider that lived in groups. Whoever was bitten was injected with paralyzing venom and eaten alive. He sighed and asked what kind of wild person this was. They opened the map, when suddenly they received a notification that danger had been detected nearby. Shinichi immediately took out his sword and told the others to be as careful as possible. He explained that a whole bunch of this little spider's friends were coming right now. With a loud whoosh, the hallway in front of the boys turned black as a huge number of spiders headed straight for them. Annie raised her staff with a serious expression, then quickly used needle rain. The spiders began to fall to the ground one by one, but it was not enough to kill them all. At that moment, Shinichi entered the field. He took a deep breath and then used his ice breath. The remaining insects instantly froze to the walls, unable to do anything. Annie smiled and said about water and ice. She stated that she and Shinichi had great compatibility and she was interested in his opinion. She asked if he wanted to have fun with her. Shinichi smiled and said that it didn't sound so bad. Elena quickly pushed her way between them, shouting that she didn't agree to it. Annie laughed softly and said that it was just a joke and she wasn't going to steal her beloved little sister's friend. Elena sarcastically agreed, then took Shinichi's hand and said that she would never give him to anyone. The boy blushed a little, then looked away. He raised his hand and thought that he would use this opportunity to acquire some of these spider skills. He looked at the report in the menu, and then he got the skills of generation and creation. He raised his hand and then quickly created a web. He was a little surprised. Then he turned to Liz and used the web on him. In no time, the boy was completely covered in web. Liz said that it was awesome. Elena angrily told them to stop playing and move on. They quickly found themselves on the 10th floor. By this point, they had already covered quite a large area. 3 days had passed since they had left their secret home. Thanks to the skill selection, Shinichi greatly expanded his abilities. He had a huge number of different skills, some of which were at an advanced level. Shinichi led the team and told the others where to go. He suggested that the guys head to the stairs and then continue moving forward. The guys climbed one floor after another quite quickly. As soon as they reached the 5th floor, they began to meet different people. They passed through the 4th floor, the 3rd, and even a 2nd was already behind them. Then they finally reached the 1st floor. They had hardly encountered any monsters, and had even seen a few adventurers. Elena and Liz stepped forward. With a wide smile, Elena pointed to a bright door that was emitting light. She happily called Shinichi and said that this was the exit. Liz also happily walked straight to the door. After a while, the guys stepped over the threshold of this door. Shinichi covered his face and eyes with his hand, wanting to see what was behind the walls of this huge labyrinth. The boy saw a huge forest in front of him. They were standing on a high surface, which allowed them to see how green fields and forests covered the ground, and on one of the hills in the distance stood a large city. Liz quickly ran out of the labyrinth and, with simple, childish joy, began to look around. He spoke admiringly about how spacious it was there. Shinichi also took some distrustful steps towards the surface. With a rather stern expression on his face, he came out and began to look around. Tanaka Shinichi stood on the very edge of the cliff, where the entrance to this spacious labyrinth was located. He looked at the green forests in amazement and said that this was the surface of this world unfamiliar to him. The boys slowly approached Shinichi and also looked at the area. The guy said that they were finally able to get out of this huge labyrinth. Mike scratched his head and walked up to Shinichi, saying what it meant, that it seemed like this was where they parted ways. Shinichi turned around, wanting to hear what else they had to say. Annie said with a smile that they still needed to go back in order to report to their guild as soon as possible about everything that had happened in this place. Shinichi noted what they said somewhat dryly. Annie explained that the closest town to this place is Marn. She explained that if Shinichi was planning on organizing a celebration, he should go to the guild. Shinichi agreed and said that in that case, that's where they would go. He shook Mike's hand and said that, anyway, he had fun traveling with them and he would like to meet again sometime in the future. Mike smiled. After that, the guys left as a team, while Shinichi silently watched their backs disappearing into the forest. Elena lost the guy for a while, and when she found him, she called out loudly, then said with a smile that she knew it was him. Shinichi asked in surprise what she meant. Elena pointed to a large stone and said that it was also on the 21st floor. It was a real temple of transmission. Shinichi touched the stone and was greeted. It was written on the stone that Mr. Shinichi Tanaka currently had a transfer point for one registered designated area. The question arose as to whether he wanted to transfer there immediately. The guy said that it probably refers to that temple near the small garden. He said that now they can go back there whenever they want. He asked if Elena plans to go back to their hidden home in the future. The girl quickly agreed and said that she would return there once she had enjoyed being on the surface. She exclaimed that she simply could not believe it, and Shinichi should live in a normal city. She asked why he had come to the surface in the first place. Shinichi smiled and said that when he first came there, he thought that he wanted to escape from the labyrinth as quickly as possible. However, there was no one in this hidden house. It was full of necessary things. It was also very comfortable. In a world where Shinichi didn't know if there was a welfare system, it would be very difficult to leave this house. He sighed and said, "Why not enjoy this moment?" Elena covered her ears with her hands and refused to listen to him any longer. Liz walked silently next to them. After some time spent on the road, the guys came out onto a large field, in the middle of which there was a small road that they could walk along. Shinichi and Elena walked silently, looking at the nature and beauty of this place. Liz ran from side to side, rejoicing and laughing at how spacious it was in this huge and endless place. Shinichi spread his arms and said how great this place was. He asked what the others thought about it. The boy noted that it was completely different from the room where they had a small garden. Shinichi suddenly looked away and said that they had been walking for about 2 hours, and he was interested in where this city was. Elena covered her eyes from the sun with her hand and said with a smile that the guy would see the city very soon. The girl did not lie, because after some time they found themselves on the busy streets of the city. Many people were walking along the streets. Elena said that they had arrived, and this was the city of Marn. The place was very beautiful and peaceful. There were fresh fruits and vegetables on the shelves of the shops, and nice people, some of whom were adventurers, were walking along the streets. Shinichi said that he was quite surprised that there was a city near a large labyrinth. Elena said that this place is called the Adventure City because it is close to the giant labyrinth Mojito. Suddenly, something interesting caught Shinichi's attention. He saw a small animal on a leash on the street. The guy asked if it was a pig. Elena said it was a pig from Monacan. It's an animal that is commonly eaten in this area. Shinichi noticed that it matches his expectations of this world. Judging by the number of livestock, this parallel world is a little different. Suddenly, Liz exclaimed about meat. Shinichi stopped the boy who was looking at the meat and said that it was a product for sale and that couldn't be eaten. Elena happily picked up something and called the others to look because the clothes were really cute. Shinichi looked at her and asked if they should go to the guild. The boys came to a busy building full of different adventurers of different ages. Shinichi said that there were indeed quite a few adventurers there. Elena smiled and said that they would soon become one of them. Shinichi thought about a homeless person like him becoming a traveler. He decided that he would definitely keep his promise with Elena, but this was the best job for him since it was something he was definitely capable of. Elena quickly walked up to the front desk, and the girl working at the guild kindly handed Elena an adventurer registration form. The girl said she would fill it out. She leaned over and started filling out one item after another while Shinichi stood silently nearby and watched. Elena asked with a smile what they should name their group. She said that it might be a bit difficult, but she wanted Shinichi to think about it. She enthusiastically said that they might try something like the Thunder Dragon's Claw or Fire Dragon's Eye. Shinichi immediately rejected her suggestions. Elena turned pale and looked at him, asking about what he had just said. The guy confidently said with a smile that their group would be called Street Kids. Hearing this statement, Elena turned pale. She loudly exclaimed that it was stupid, and she did not understand why he chose this name at all. Shinichi said that it was her fault since she left the name to him and therefore it would be final. The girl at the front desk handed them a piece of paper and said that their registration was now complete and that this was his adventurer card. She politely asked him to take it. She explained to him that all adventurers start out as rookies. Depending on his abilities, he can work his way up to advanced, special, and even master ranks. She smiled broadly and said that his reward would increase as he progressed, and so she sincerely wished him luck. Shinichi said that he understood everything and then thanked the girl. After that, the guys went outside and walked forward. Elena happily said that they were now officially a team. She said that they should take on a whole bunch of missions and earn a lot of money. Shinichi smiled and agreed. Suddenly, Liz was very surprised, and Shinichi turned to see what had surprised the boy so much. He noticed that the whole city was in a panic. People were shouting in the streets that it was terrible, and a dragon appeared. Shinichi asked in surprise who it was. The frightened man said that it was a huge lizard that looked like a monster. A long time ago, it appeared in this very city. About 20 years ago, they encountered him, and then there were more than 200 victims. Mike ran up to Shinichi, recognizing him. The guy said that they met again. Mike asked if the boys had heard about the fake dragon yet. Shinichi confirmed it. Mike was glad, because thanks to this, he didn't have to explain anything. He apologized and said that he wanted to ask them to help them destroy this monster. Shinichi was surprised and asked if they really wanted the guys to help them. Shinichi said that they became travelers, but they were new. They told about what happened and named their squad. Mike admitted that Marina didn't have enough fighting power, and they were lucky to have a chance to fight the monster outside the city. If the monster came to the city, it would be all over. Mike was impressed after seeing Shinichi defeat the centipede earlier and wanted to ask them for help. Elena asked what was bothering the boy. She said that a lot of people could die and she couldn't just stand there and watch it happen. Annie was against Elena fighting. From a young age until now, she could only use basic magic. Annie didn't think Elena could fight. Elena exclaimed that her skills had improved and that her time in the maze had made her stronger. Annie asked if her sister could imagine how nervous she was. She said that Elena was being silly. The girl said that her sister didn't care and looked down on her. She asked Annie to watch now, because she would become a great sorceress and show her sister. Annie said that it was time for Elena to admit the truth. The girl started crying, saying that her sister didn't understand her feelings. Shinichi stopped her and told her not to take things so seriously. He said that they would help them destroy the monster, and he promised to protect Elena. In exchange, the homeless would receive all the rewards before it cracked. After that, they ran away. Shinichi asked where the dragon was. Elena said that it was opposite the city, and they needed to hurry to the gate. At this time, the monster was destroying everything. It attacked people and walls. The girl held out a guild announcement for all travelers. It was necessary to eliminate the Facties dragon. The group or person who defeats the dragon will be rewarded with 30 gold coins. Anyone who helps fight will also be rewarded, so everyone should participate. The guild was raising their spirits. Shinichi said that if they found themselves in danger, they should retreat. He told his friends not to think about doing anything that would put them in danger. The boys went out, and Shinichi handed the boys the fruits. The guy decided to activate all his abilities and quickly finish this. Suddenly, Elena stepped forward. He didn't understand why there were yellow spots on her back, because usually they were red. He thought that they had more important things to do. The moment the dragon opened up, Shinichi charged with his sword. He quickly attacked the monster, but did not penetrate the scales. The dragon looked at him, then hit him with his tail. The monster was too big, and their strength was not equal. Liz went next. The boy climbed onto the dragon's head and then hit it with all his might. The monster looked at him and then began to swing from side to side, trying to throw the child off. Shinichi and Elena exclaimed that they would get him out of there. Elena used a fireball, giving the boy the opportunity to escape. She immediately asked if he was okay. He silently agreed. Elena noticed that the techniques of this level of magic did not work. However, she had also become stronger. She said that she was using more magic that could only be used once. She raised her staff and said she was coming. She used a close ball. Despite her expectations, the monster hit her with its tail and she flew back. Shinichi said that she just made him angry for no reason and she should throw her electric paralysis at him instead. The girl cried and said that she was a sorceress, and she hated such vile magic as smoke screens and stunning. She vowed to become the strongest sorceress. Shinichi saw those yellow spots again. He said that those spots on her back were glowing and some of them were disappearing. He used analysis. The evaluation of the result said that the healing acupuncture point normalizes the flow of magical power. This allows the user to use intermediate and advanced magic. Shinichi was surprised when he read this description. Seeing the boy's reaction, Elena looked at him from behind his back in surprise. Tanaka didn't understand what this healing acupuncture point was. looking at the girl and the menu, which said that this point could normalize the flow of magical power, the girl who was currently weak. Then the boy frowned thoughtfully, thinking about it. And if the results of the analysis were correct, then Erna could have incredible magical abilities, but now she was sick. Therefore, she could not show her natural power, and therefore Tanaka assumed that he could get rid of her stain. Then Shinichi told the girl to listen to him. Erna looked at the guy with distrust. Then he told the girl that most likely the results of the analysis could be correct. Erna was scared and a little surprised by such a statement of her friend, continuing to sit on the ground. The girl didn't want to believe what the guy was talking about now, about things that made someone immobile. She didn't understand why Tanaka was sure that it could work. Then the adventurer said, sitting on one knee in front of the girl, that he heard that it had a healing effect. Erna thought about Tanaka's words, assuming that her magic power was weak due to illness or something. Tanaka didn't understand what Erna wanted to do, but a monster was already running towards them at full speed, targeting the adventurers. Then Erna said decisively, looking decisively at the monster, that she wanted to make the obvious point, because this was their only chance to destroy this thing. Shinichi understood the girl, and then the adventurer told Pero not to look in their direction for now, which the boy obeyed and immediately turned away, keeping his fists ready. Then Tanaka looked at the girl's back, guessing where that point should be, looking at it carefully. He pressed on the right place, which made the girl at first silent, frowning, and then felt pain and screamed from it. She fell to the ground and put her palm on the place where the big dot should have been. She began to breathe heavily from this unexpected pain. Tanaka worriedly asked Erna, who continued to lie on the ground without moving, if she was okay. He then looked towards Pero, just as the monster, screaming, swung at the boy, after which the dragon threw Pero aside, who managed to cover himself from the blow. The adventurer knew that things were bad, then said decisively that they had to hurry and help the others, keeping his sword ready. The guy looked at the girl lying down, asking if she could move. At this, Erna began to laugh quietly and ominously, smiling strangely, and then raised herself up on her knees and elbows, continuing to laugh. Tanaka frowned, looking closely at the sorceress from whom magic emanated, and then worriedly called out to his friend. The elf looked forward with determination, her brows furrowed, noting that she had never felt such power before, and now she was able to handle that spell. Tanaka looked at the monster, noticing that the dragon, which continued to rage and scream, was approaching them. And then he asked if Erna could handle him, to which the girl asked Shinichi to move away, rising from the ground and looking at the beast. She spread her arms out to the sides, preparing to use advanced magic. A flash of flame appeared. The girl pointed her staff towards the dragon when the boy assumed that her hidden magical powers had awakened. The girl was happy that she could finally use the magic she dreamed of, looking straight ahead. She remembered how her father had told her to learn magic, otherwise she would be a hindrance to her family, and the girl could only apologize for it, continuing to sit on her father's knees. But there were also those who said that the girl who was then crying from her weakness had magical powers, and her older sister was sure that Erna could do it someday. Then Erna, having packed her things in a backpack and leaving the house, decided that she would not be able to return home until she became an excellent sorceress. She looked sadly at her home, which she had decided to leave, wiping away unnecessary tears. And now, with the help of her advanced magic and a burst of flame, she was able to defeat the monster, which was now lying motionless. Erna turned to everyone, saying that this was the power she was looking for. She told everyone to look at what she did with her power, adding that this dragon was nothing to her. Tanaka was amazed by her, and then said that the dragon no longer moved, suggesting that Erna was able to kill it. Shinichi then walked towards the dragon's body. He raised his sword in the air, deciding to deliver the final blow to the monster's head, to be completely safe. Suddenly, the dragon opened its eyes, and then opened its mouth towards Tanaka, who had already noticed the dragon's movement, which wanted to scorch him with its fiery breath. Flames mixed with smoke began to appear from the dragon's mouth, when Shinichi already wanted to step aside and take cover. But Erna looked towards them with determination, heading to help her friend, and then used Firewall to protect the adventurer from the flames released by the monster. Tanaka watched as the wall prevented the fire from hitting him. Erna then explained that it was a magic spell called Wall of Flame that absorbed fire attacks. Then she noticed that the dragon had plenty of energy. En was Ader, Pauls or Seed, and Big O tearing in the Nade and Bade. Nanko watched as the dragon began to turn around to try to escape from the adventurers. Erna then said, holding her weapon, that the monster was trying to escape. Tanaka said that they had to stop it by spinning the ball on the tip of his sword's hilt. They went at the dragon with determination, and the adventurer asked if Erna had a spell that could stop the dragon. The girl thought about it, and then suggested that the electric paralysis, which had not worked for her before. She suggested using a fire chain, but then she noted that her spell might not work due to the size of the dragon. Tanaka agreed with the girl, and then told her to try to do everything possible to create a chance for them to neutralize this dragon. The girl pointed her staff at the monster again, and then used fire chain, which began to wrap around the dragon's body, which screamed and broke free from the clanking chains. Tanaka resolutely ran towards the tied-up dragon, thinking that this time he would be able to finish it off by swinging his sword. At the moment when he jumped towards the dragon, an electric discharge appeared, which was also directed at the monster and began to hit the monster with electric discharges, from which the monster began to scream louder. And when he realized it had worked, Tanaka swung his sword with all his might, attacking the dragon. But suddenly, the chain broke, releasing one of the dragon's paws, which threw the adventurer aside. Rising from the ground, the adventurer cursed, looking at the struggling dragon, which continued to roar, breaking the metal chains. Erna was upset that the dragon was able to break her magical chains. Suddenly, another person joined them. Mickey tried to distract the dragon by shouting at the lizard and getting its attention. The monster turned to the guy, and then immediately began to run furiously, loudly stomping after the guy, who became the lizard's new target. The adventurer looked at his friend. He just smiled, saying that he had made Tanaka wait, and then added that he still hoped to receive a reward for this matter. Miki dodged a powerful blow from the dragon's paw, saying that he could have bought some time for Tanaka. At this time, Erna called out and then turned around. She saw her older sister, who sat down in front of her younger sister, asking if she could use a spell. Erna said that she could, warning that it would be difficult to use one of these powers again. Then the older sister said that Erna was the only one who could use magic powerful enough. Then, placing her hand on the gray-haired woman's chest, Ain said that she would give up her power, and then Erna would be able to use her magic again. The girl remembered Erna, who was constantly crying, and now she could not believe that she had grown up. She remembered how she told her little sister that she would succeed, stroking her head. But now Ain put her hands on her little sister's shoulders, confident that Erna was supposed to succeed. Erna looked at her hand, realizing that it was filled with energy and magic was floating around it, and then she clenched her hand on her staff. After that, throwing back the hem of her cloak, the girl said that her older sister should look at her. Then Erna said that she, as the great sorceress Erna Frederia, would do it. She shouted to all those who were fighting the monster to turn back so as not to fall under her blow. She then used the maximum level, sending a burst of flames towards the dragon. The fire began to move towards the monster, after which there was a big explosion. The dragon began to burn alive, continuing to move in different directions, making a strange whistle. After that, the dragon's incapacitated body fell, but smoke continued to come from it and hiss strangely. The adventurers joyfully looked at the defeated dragon. The older sister noticed how incredible the power was, realizing that Erna had surpassed the best of the best. At this point, she began to tremble with fatigue, after which she fell to her knees. Ain looked at her younger sister in fear. Sitting down on the ground, Erna said that everything was fine, and then she suggested that she had used too much magic when her older sister sat down next to her. She asked what happened to that dragon. Then the elder sister said that it took a lot of energy, but the dragon did not move anymore. Then the sister helped Erna to lie down more comfortably, holding her head with her hand, saying that she had defeated the dragon. Erna smiled because she was happy about it. Suddenly, Tanaka called the girl, who immediately sat up normally and looked at him. Shinichi carried the boy on his back and then smiled and said that he was glad that the girl was okay. Then Pero rushed over to hug the girl and said that the girl was adorable. Erna noticed that the boy had cuts and scratches. She hugged Pero, stroking his head and telling him that he had fought his feelings while she was wrong, and then thanked the boy for it. Miki approached Tanaka and then said that he thought a lot about them, because the homeless were really something, and then added that the guys always managed to prove him wrong. Tanaka then sighed, and then placed his hand on the girl's head, squatting in front of Erna, saying that this time, they were here because of her. Afterwards, he thanked the girl. She, hearing the guy, looked at him, and then only giggled tiredly. Tanaka extended his hand to the girl, asking if they would return to the city, and the girl agreed with him, offering him her hand in return. The girl then said that from now on, Shinichi and Pero were to call the girl a great sorceress. Tanaka noted that Erna was becoming too self-confident and then suggested that they get something to eat as soon as they got home. It was early morning after their victory over the dragon when they returned to the inn last night. Erna looked at the coins in her hands contentedly, humming a tune. Later, she loudly entered the room, opening the door wide, holding a bag in her hands and asking if Shinichi was awake. The boy looked at the girl, saying that she had been making noise since the morning, so she should have entered the room more calmly. The sorceress looked in surprise at the adventurer with his arms crossed on his chest, who was using the skill standing on the wall. Pero looked at Tanaka with admiration, saying that this skill was very cool, to which Shinichi only smiled. Then Shinichi said that he got a lot of interesting skills from the dragon, opening the menu again. And Pero noted that he was quickly becoming a superhero. Erna told them to forget about it, because she went and received their reward of 30 coins for defeating the dragon, and then suggested going shopping. Tanaka asked if the girl was looking for something specific in the store. Then Erna said that she needed clothes, shoes, and cosmetics. Then the guy interrupted her, saying that it was enough because he understood her. Then he clarified, looking at the girl and doubting whether the traveler needed cosmetics at all. Erna said that she needed it because it was a necessary expense for a beautiful sorceress. She began to play with the guy, telling him to look her in the face when talking to her. The guy understood her and then asked to let him go because the girl could break his neck. After a while, they went shopping in the city, walking along the streets of Marne. First, they chose clothes for the girl, where Shinichi played the role of a holder of things. Then they went to another shop, where the adventurer found some things for himself. Tanaka chuckled quietly, unable to believe that there were any familiar spices in this world, continuing to smile and examine the jars in his hands. He was looking at the soy sauce and miso in his hands, thinking about eating Japanese food with it. Erna looked at the guy with displeasure, and then asked how long he was going to keep the smile on his face, because it looked a little strange. She then looked at Pero, noticing that he needed some spare clothes as well. She turned around and asked Shinichi if the adventurer could watch their things while they went shopping for more, and he agreed. Shinichi sat down tiredly on the bench, throwing his arm over the back of the bench, enjoying his short rest. But then something caught his attention. Shinichi looked at the two people standing in front of him who were talking to each other. He noticed that they were not travelers, assuming that they were knights. Then the night girl asked him if he was sure that Dovan had arrived in their city. Then the guy said that if the witness was right, he should have been somewhere in the city. Then the knight noted that it would be difficult for them to look for Dovan in such a spacious place. The girl agreed, but suddenly she thought of something. Then they approached Shinichi, calling out to him and saying that they had a question for him. The boy just looked at the knight without any interest, not moving from his place. The girl knight looked at the boy seriously, waiting for him to say or do something. Tanaka then said with displeasure that she had appeared before him like a bolt from the blue. Then the guy noted that she was quite beautiful, but still seemed problematic to him. The girl glared at the boy, asking what kind of attitude this was, since she was a knight and he dared to sit in front of her while she was talking without showing proper respect. The girl then asked his name, sharply thrusting her weapon forward, adding that no matter what he did, the boy would be hurt. The boy replied that he was the homeless Shinichi, noting that the knight was hot-tempered. She was a little surprised, and when the boy wanted to repeat his name again, the girl interrupted him. She got angry and called the guy an impudent person who wanted to fool her. Then her co-worker came up to her and asked the girl to calm down, calling her Freya. After that, the knight politely addressed Shinichi, expressing his apologies for disturbing Tanaka. The knight explained that they were approaching him because they had several questions they would like to ask him. Shinichi frowned at the knight and then said that he would answer everything he could. The knight was very grateful to the adventurer for his assistance. He then decided to start the interrogation and asked if Shinichi had heard of a man named Noven, and Tanaka, after thinking, replied that he had not. Freya then intervened in their conversation and told the boy that it was useless for him to lie, since she had just seen him act strangely. She then pointed at the boy and suggested that Shinichi was scared because he was trying to hide his lie. The guy listened to her and thought about what he was guilty of, looking at the warlike Freya. And then he honestly admitted that he looked at the girl's form, watching how she blushed embarrassedly, not believing the words of the adventurer she heard. The guy thought that despite the armor hiding the girl, he looked at her uniform several times. The girl also had a great shape, so it was only natural that she stole the men's glances. The girl bashfully and confusedly jumped away from the guy, covering herself with her hand, calling him names. She then assumed that he was simply trying to change the subject. But Shinichi, continuing to sit in his place, said that he did not know the whereabouts of this Dovan, and then said that he did not mind if the girl began to torture him for information. Then Gale told the boy to hold on because he understood what Shinichi was talking about. Then Gale asked Freya not to be angry with the boy. The traveler thought, because he had found a person who understood him, what the adventurer was talking about now. The knight apologized to his comrade, asking her not to be angry with Shinichi. The adventurer realized that this knight also understood him, so he assumed that the boy was also under the power of the ripe fruit. Shinichi again said that he didn't know the guy they were looking for, so he couldn't help them. The knight understood the adventurer. Gale then said that there was no point in interrogating Shinichi any further, and then thanked the boy for wasting his time on them. Shinichi watched as the knights began to move away from him, looking for a new resident to interrogate. Later, they approached him, apologizing for the wait. Shinichi looked seriously in the direction of the voice. Perot and Erna, who was holding a new purchase in her hands, approached him and asked if those knights were his acquaintances, to which Shinichi, getting up from the bench, answered in the negative, saying that they simply had unpleasant questions. The guy asked if Perot and Erna had finished shopping, to which the girl replied that she was almost done. Then he said that it was time to go home. But Erna was a little dissatisfied, saying that she wanted to eat something tasty. The guy didn't know where the fatigue came from, and then rubbed his eye, guessing that it was because of the fight with the dragon, and that's why he felt quite sleepy. Then the guy entered the menu. It said that the boy would soon begin to evolve, and once the evolution was complete, he would be able to return to his previous form. Erna asked what happened to Shinichi. The guy turned to her and answered that he was asked if the guy wanted to develop. The girl was too loudly surprised by the guy's words, causing unnecessary attention to their group from the outside. After which, passers-by started approaching Shinichi, congratulating him on the fact that he would begin to develop. Then the second man congratulated Shinichi. More and more people came, happily looking at Tanaka. They thought it was cool, not believing that he wanted to begin to develop. Erna, who was standing in this crowd, congratulated the guy again, joyfully squeezing her palms because it was so great, and Perot did the same, hugging the adventurer. But Shinichi frowned and didn't understand what was happening at all, so he asked for everything to be explained to him. Erna then said that evolution referred to the process by which a human moved up to the next biological class. For example, an elf became a high elf, and a dwarf became a high dwarf. Erna added that for them, it was an impressive feat, and no one knew, but it was considered fashionable to become a completely different race. Shinichi thought, as he scratched his chin, his current race was a homeless person, so he assumed that he could have changed to a normal race. Then he said that this evolution was a good thing after all, which made the girl smile happily upon hearing the guy's confession. Erna smiled, saying that no matter who the guy became, the girl promised that she would not leave him, and it would be in vain if he missed such a chance. The guy agreed with the girl because there was nothing to be afraid of here, going back to the menu and pressing the right button. The screen showed information that after a while, the guy might feel very sleepy, so he had to be in a safe place and lie down. After that, Shinichi said that they were going back to the hotel. The boy continued to lie and sleep in bed, waiting for the evolution to be complete. Shinichi sleepily opened one eye when sleep left him. The boy wheezed and then sat up, holding his head. He got out of bed and walked to the door, thinking about how dry his throat was, still holding his head. He went outside, went to the well, got some water, and began to drink a lot of water straight from the bucket. Then he tore himself away from the bucket, quenching his thirst and breathing deeply. And now, sitting on the grass, he didn't understand why he wanted to drink so much right now, because all he did was sleep. So he thought that maybe it was a side effect of the development. Then he looked at the trembling water in the bucket. He stared at his reflection in surprise, noticing that he had developed a third eye, after which he screamed in fear. He moved away from the bucket in fear, thinking that there was a monster in his reflection, but he quickly denied it. The adventurer carefully touched his forehead, assuming and thinking that this could be his evolution. The guy looked at the reflection in the water again and noticed that this third eye had a red iris, looking at it carefully. Shinichi looked at his clenched hands, thinking that he definitely felt empowered, and he also had gained a great and improved vision. He looked up at the sky, looking at the moon, realizing that despite the darkness outside, he could see everything so clearly that it didn't feel like it was night. He then decided to go into the menu, seeing that his race name had changed to Homeless Species. Shinichi then removed the sign, which began to disappear. The boy didn't quite understand what it was, but he definitely felt much stronger than before. After that, he laughed, realizing it. Shinichi began to wave his legs and arms, noting that this evolution was too amazing. Then he grouped himself and jumped very high up to the second floor. Shinichi was so excited that his body could not stop moving. He began to move further through the night and sleeping city with the help of his jumps, examining everything on his way. Then he saw a girl in an alley who was probably in trouble. The girl was very scared when 3 guys cornered her and threatened her with a knife, telling the girl to sit quietly and then no one would get hurt. Shinichi then thought that this was the perfect chance for him to try his hand. He ducked onto the roof, heading towards them, and then quickly jumped down in front of the bandits. He apologized for the intrusion, cracking his fists, and then warned them that they would all be his guinea pigs. Then the girl screamed, clutching her head in panic that a man with a third eye had joined them, thinking he was a monster. Then one of the lawbreakers with a knife swung the knife at the guy, shouting at him to get lost. Shinichi deftly caught the knife with only 2 fingers, and then easily bent the blade of the cold weapon with them. He looked at the attacker, asking if that was all he had. And then he called him over, beckoning them with his hand. All 3 hooligans couldn't believe their eyes, because it was impossible. Then one of them suggested leaving as far away from that place as possible. But Shinichi didn't let them do that. He immediately swung his fist and then punched one of the enemies, sending him flying. He then moved towards the second guy, hitting him right in the face with his elbow, causing a crunching sound to be heard. And when the last bandit remained, he pounced on him, grabbing the guy by the head and then kneed him in the stomach. Afterwards, the traveler looked at the beaten guys, calling them pathetic and thinking that this could hardly even be called training. He then turned his head towards the girl, saying that it was dangerous for her to walk around alone at night, and only then realized that the girl had fainted while crouched against the wall of the building. Without further thought, he decided that he was finished with help and would now go his own way, running up the wall. He jumped high, heading across the rooftops to continue walking around the city, laughing joyfully and loudly. Time passed, a new day came, and now Shinichi, who rested his head on his hands, and his friends were sitting at the table when Erna assumed that Shinichi had not slept all night. He raised his head, saying that he had slept a little because when the sun rose, he remembered that he was in his bed. And then he added that, in any case, they now understood and knew where the guy went at night. Then Pero eagerly asked the adventurer to show his red eye, to which Shinichi agreed to his request. He opened his third eye, showing it to the boy, who was delighted by it, saying that he also wanted to develop. Shinichi responded to the boy's wish that evolution only came to good children. This meant that Pero had to listen carefully to his words and do everything possible to help Erna, and Pero resolutely agreed with the boy. Shinichi then said that it was time for them to return to the hidden house, to which Erna thoughtfully said that staying in Marn was not bad for them. But then Miki quickly approached them, calling out to them. The adventurers asked the worried boy, who was clutching something in his hand, what had happened. The knight then asked worriedly what Shinichi had done, pointing his finger at him, but Tanaka did not understand what he meant. Afterwards, Mikey, in a panic, showed a leaflet with Shinichi's face drawn on it, saying that he meant it, and then added that there was a wanted poster hanging there, saying that a maniac had shown up the previous night. Shinichi froze in horror, realizing what his night walk last night could lead to. Erna pressed her palms to her face, not understanding how this could happen, to which the guy quickly said it was a misunderstanding because he just helped the girl. Then he realized that they would have a hard time living in the city now. He stood up abruptly from the table, saying that they were going to hide in the hidden house for a while. The girl was surprised that they were going to go back there right then. She stood up resolutely, not noticing her older sister. She tried to stop Erna, but the girl apologized, saying that she would return later. Then she shouted to the quickly leaving boy and Pero to wait for her. They returned to the hidden house where the water flowed from 2 fountains and everything was calm. And now they were sitting at the table again, looking at the sheet in the middle of the table. Erna frowned at the boy, saying that she wouldn't do that since the boy didn't even know how much work his idea would require. To this, Shinichi said that he just wanted them to have enough food to live a normal life. The girl then asked why they couldn't just buy everything in the city. But the guy folded his arms across his chest and replied that he was categorically against this proposal, to which the girl slapped her palm on the table in displeasure, not understanding why he didn't want to do that. Then the girl grumbled and said that she didn't want to make a farm where they wanted to raise cows and pigs. She took the paper and pointed to the farm plan, noting that the land was too wide, and if they were going to have cattle, the pen would have to be small. The adventurer listened. And then he told the girl again that he wanted them to be able to raise cows, pigs, and chickens. After all, Shinichi wanted them to have enough food, and for this they needed all the space. At these words, the girl got angry again, clutching her head. Then the guy said that he had already thought about using the trees that grew nearby in the forest as lumber for building small gardens. He had already planned how they would get livestock. For this, they could make a deal with a professional livestock farmer in Marne who could provide them with cows and pigs. Then he added that Shinichi planned to catch some rabbits and chickens and keep them in a miniature garden. Erna gritted her teeth angrily as she listened to the boy's plans and growled. He smiled, understanding the girl, because Erna hated this business, and Shinichi said that she did not have to help him with the construction. He explained that he just wanted her to help plan the interior of the miniature garden. The girl was not happy with the way he asked about it. After a while, they were standing in a clearing where the wind was shaking the blades of grass in different directions. The girl sat down in front of the grass, saying that she did not believe that they were going to build a farm here because she saw nothing but grass. Then Shinichi said that they could make their home anywhere because that's what the homeless people thought and believed. Erna only skeptically agreed with him because she had already seen it in action. Then the guy said that they could start by taking his sword in his hands and then twirled the sphere on the tip of its handle. And then he swung it and started chopping grass, which scattered in all directions. After they got rid of the grass, Shinichi started chopping down trees to use as lumber. Pero and Erna were hauling large rocks from the place where their farm was supposed to be located. And after 3 hours, they sat tiredly near the large stones, tired and breathing heavily after continuous work. Erna fell to the ground, spreading her arms wide and saying she was tired. Pero sighed and said he was hungry. Shinichi, sitting on a large boulder, understood that this operation might take them some time, but if they had more help, they would do it faster, and then fell silent. A pack of monsters was already heading their way, which was not very friendly towards the adventurers. Erna noticed that a group of tiger bison wanted to attack them now that they were exhausted and without strength. The monster was resolutely running straight at them. So Shinichi thought that the animals were angry that they were invading their territory, and then he noticed that the big predator was their leader. Then the boy said that he wanted to be nice, stopping the tiger from running at full speed with his hands, rolling his foot on the ground a little. And then the boy swung, saying that the beast didn't stand a chance against the new and improved Shinichi. And then he struck the tiger with all his might, right between its eyes. Then the defeated tigers began to leave the territory, their heads hanging down. Shinichi was surprised that it was all over so quickly. And then the menu came up again, telling him that he could acquire a new skill. The adventurer was surprised by the choice, and then told Erna that he had acquired a new skill called guardianship, which surprised the girl. Then she explained that with this incredibly rare skill, he could control monsters and people, and Shinichi said that it actually sounded pretty useful. The girl was no longer surprised by such a normal reaction, which did not cause delight, but the guy did not understand what she was talking about. Then Erna said that she was simply not used to his superhuman abilities, to which Shinichi changed the subject and suggested returning to building a farm. After some time, they finished making a fence that enclosed their gardens. Shinichi tiredly rubbed his forehead, noting that they had already laid the foundation at this point. The girl was glad to hear these words, and then heard the guy's assumption that they were going to the city to find a cow, because that meant they were going to Marne again. Then she reminded them that they were out of seasonings. Erna suggested they go shopping while they were in town, and they could also do their makeup. And Shinichi interrupted the girl again, having already figured out her plan. After a few weeks, they finally returned to the city, where the townspeople walked along the narrow streets, going about their business, and so they came to the city. They walked through the streets, approaching the building they were looking for, where Erna reminded Shinichi that he had been framed and was now a fugitive, while the adventurer carefully opened the door. They then entered a gun shop, where various types of weapons were displayed on display. Then the man greeted them with a smile. Tanaka put a bag of weapons on the counter and then asked the seller how much he was willing to pay for their find. Then the merchant asked them to wait a few minutes. They were going to exchange the weapons they had picked up in the ruins for money. The guy waited for him to finish examining their find. Soon the merchant finished examining their goods. Then the merchant said that he could only give them 3 coins for all this. Erna was unhappy that he named a small price and could not give them more coins. Then the man, crossing his arms on his chest, suggested that the adventurers find something of better quality, then he could give more money. At that moment, Shinichi looked at Pero, who was looking at the metal claws with interest. He approached the boy, asking if Pero was interested in the weapon. The boy replied that he simply thought he could be stronger if he had a weapon, and then he reminded him of when they fought the dragon, he was helpless, when the monster simply threw the boy back when he wanted to attack him. Shinichi saw that the boy was worried about something useful. Then the boy picked up the claws and asked the seller how much those claws cost, and the man told him the price. Then Shinichi paid and said that he wanted to buy them for the boy. Pero was surprised. He did not believe that the adventurer decided to buy him this weapon, after which Shinichi handed the purchase to the boy. At first the boy froze, his eyes wide open, looking at the guy, and then the boy smiled and thanked him. Then they decided to go look for a cow. When they came to the farm where the cows were grazing, the owner said that they could choose any cow they liked. The man then approached one of the cows, saying that she was young and gave a lot of milk. After milking her, he then handed them a glass of milk to try. The man said that this milk came from one of the best types of cows, known as a milk cow. Shinichi lifted the glass to his lips. After taking a few sips of the milk, the boys froze in surprise. They said it was delicious, so Pero happily shouted that they wanted to drink more. To this, the man said that he liked honest guys like them. After that, Shinichi asked the price of the cow, which was 10 coins. Rubbing his chin, the adventurer thought that it was quite expensive. Then the farmer explained that this cow was of good appearance, so it cost twice as much as a normal cow. Shinichi decided to take this cow after all, after which the farmer thanked the guy for the purchase. He warned that this cow was sensitive to stress, so he recommended placing her on pasture. The farmer then assumed that they were adventurers and then asked them if everything was okay in the guild, but Shinichi didn't understand what was wrong. The farmer wasn't sure why. The guild had been closed for about a week. The guild leaders weren't doing their job and were just harassing the women, and then he assumed they were holding some kind of meeting, which was pretty stupid. The man then explained that they had no adventurers. The road to the next town was filled with monsters, and he needed to move the cattle to the next village. When Shinichi asked about the feudal lord's help, the farmer said that they hadn't been doing their job well lately either. He then suggested that perhaps the feudal lords were being manipulated by a girl named Karen, who was already influencing the guild leaders. The adventurers continued listening as the man said that she was a dangerous girl, which alarmed Erna. The farmer waved at the boys, saying that he would go his own way and asked them to be more careful than the adventurers. Shinichi then noticed his friend acting strangely, as she seemed lost in her thoughts. He asked her what had happened, but Erna said she was fine and suggested they go to the shopping district to do some shopping. Then they came to the city to this shopping area, tying the cow to the wall. They went to do their shopping. As they walked down the street, the girl complained about the weight of her shopping. Shinichi remarked that he had a feeling that they bought too many spices and building materials. Afterwards, Erna asked why they couldn't give half of the things to the cow they had bought so that she could carry them. But Pero stood in front of the cow and reminded Erna that the cow was not supposed to overwork herself. But Erna suggested putting a few purchases on it to lighten her load, and so Pero was against the girl's idea, because after that, the cow could have problems producing milk. Shinichi looked at the boy, saying that he had not thought about Pero loving cows so much. Afterwards, he looked forward with interest, where the noise was coming from. They were curious to know what was going on with the crowd in front of them, who were walking down the street. Each man was holding flags and posters with that very Karen in their hands, and they were joyfully shouting her name, continuing their procession. One of the women tried to call her husband, asking him with tears in her eyes to come home. Their daughter stood next to her, also asking her father to come back, but he walked past without even looking in their direction. Tanaka then assumed that this was the meeting that the farmer had mentioned, noting that it was definitely not normal. Erna frowned and then told her friends that it was the work of a succubus. Shinichi realized that the sorceress knew something about this, so he asked her to tell them more. Then the girl lowered her head and began her story. She told him that before she met Tanaka and Pero, she was a baggage handler for a party known as the Night Rats. They were going on an adventure together, and they were heading to the 21st floor of the Mojito Labyrinth. And then Karen was at the party too. Everything was going smoothly until they got to the place right before the 21st floor. All the guys suddenly started arguing about whose girlfriend Karen was, thinking that they didn't want to share the girl with anyone, and attacking each other with their fists. Karen forced the 6 men in their group to argue, pick up their swords, and kill each other. Then Erna, in horror, managed to run away and hide. But he saw that girl and her true succubus form, which had demonic wings and a tail. Shinichi listened to the girl who couldn't understand why she had to force the party members to kill each other, since it didn't seem like Karen was after money, and she also understood that the current group could be stronger after that. Erna tried to understand why the succubus was making the city like this, forcing the citizens of the city to listen to her. Then she guessed that Karen's true goal was probably to take control of Marna and destroy all the adventurers. Erna understood that, in the end, adventurers were the enemies of monsters, and Shinichi added that Karen's tactics were therefore quite devious. But suddenly, someone shouted that they had found the elf who had spoken to Tanaka. All the men looked at Erna with a frown, saying that they had been looking for her everywhere. The men pointed their guns at the girl, and to carry out the order, they had to punish Erna, who deserved to be punished. As if they were hypnotized, they said that they had to destroy Erna for Karen's sake. Shinichi gritted his teeth, thinking that these guys were simply being manipulated. The adventurer reached for his sword, wondering what they should do now, hiding Erna behind his back, who was not surprised by this. Shinichi tried to call out to the boys, who didn't even pay any attention to his words, continuing to walk towards their goal. But then one of them began to attack the boy, shouting that the intruders had to be destroyed, swinging his knife. Then Shinichi managed to stop the guy with the knife with his sword, cursing briefly when the two metals met with a loud sound. Then the stranger swung again to do damage. Shinichi turned around and said that these guys were being controlled, so they should have tried to slow down their movements. Erna understood the guy and then used electric paralyzer, directing magic at the townspeople. Lightning immediately headed towards the attackers, with a characteristic crack, striking them with electricity. And then Shinichi began to neutralize the attackers. He kicked one away. Another man swung at Shinichi, but he stopped him, hitting him in the chest with his elbow. At this point, Pero began to help him with this. He pushed the two men so that they hit each other's heads. All lay defeated on the ground, breathing heavily, groaning and moaning from the blows they had received. Then one of them started to get up, sighing, sitting down normally on his knees. He did not understand who he was. Then Shinichi realized when the guy spoke that the mind control was gone. The stranger put his hand to his head, trying to remember something. Then he said that his name was Noven, and he didn't understand how he got there. Then Shinichi sat down in front of Noven and asked if Noven remembered how he attacked them, to which Noven was very surprised, not remembering it at all. And then he grabbed his head, screaming, feeling a strong headache. Noven extended his trembling hand forward towards the adventurer and asked him to help them, saying that they were being controlled, and then rage appeared in his eyes again. He screamed and began to squeeze Shinichi's neck with force, who said that the people were still under control, trying to stop him. The men began to rise from the ground again, taking their weapons and saying that they needed to kill. Erna warned the adventurer about this, who was trying to remove the hypnotized guy's hands from his neck. Then the guards came up to them and asked what was happening. The men froze, and then Shinichi called out to the guards, and the attacking men began to run away from them as quickly as possible. Shinichi clicked his tongue in annoyance and displeasure as he watched the boys run away. Then one of the guards asked if it was the previous group. The adventurer agreed with the man, saying that they had attacked them, and then asked if there was anything they could have done. The guard then replied that several of his colleagues were also under Karen's control, so they couldn't do anything with that many. Shinichi frowned and assumed that Karen might be watching them from somewhere, so they had to leave as soon as the sorceress could. Feather pat the cow when Ernest said that at this rate, the guild and the city could become ruins. To this, Shinichi said that they did not know where Karen was, and then added that they had luggage, so they should find a safe place for a while. After a while, Shinichi sat at the table with his hands behind his head, noting that this situation was unpleasant. Then he said that they didn't expect Erna to still be alive, so they probably tried to get rid of the sorceress by force. Then he sighed and realized that their victory over the dragon had attracted too much attention, to which the girl asked her friend not to pretend that she was to blame for it. There were vegetables on the table, which Erna continued to peel, asking what they were going to do next, and Pero stood next to her, watching attentively as the girl peeled the onion. Shinichi thought about it, saying that the common people were being held hostage, so they couldn't act carelessly. Erna continued cooking, then added that the only thing they could do was try to secretly gather information in the city. She then looked at the boy, asking if the boy was okay. Pero said that he couldn't stop crying, continuing to chop onions. After a while, their lunch was ready. While setting out plates with hot and delicious food, Erna said that their food for lunch was curry. Shinichi repeated the girl's last words. He looked at the plate. Seeing the dish, the adventurer smiled happily. They sat at the table, putting their palms together and thanking for the food. The guy ate one spoon of the food prepared by the girl, and then in his mind he was already admiring the taste of the dish in Indian, putting his palms together. He confessed that he never thought he would eat this food in that world. Shinichi continued to scoop up the fake food. Pero was also delighted by the taste of the food, bringing the cup to his face. Then Erna asked them to eat more slowly. A little later, the adventurer's plate was empty. Then Shinichi remarked that everything would be perfect if they added a little white rice. And while Erna was drinking from a mug, the guy saw a sign that said whether Shinichi wanted to develop Erna. He was very surprised, to which the sorceress looked at him with interest. Then he told his friend about it, who also did not understand why they asked the guy about it, and not her. So the sorceress thought that Shinichi just decided to deceive her, then she winked, but the guy didn't understand why she thought he would do something like that. And when he asked what he should have done, Erna shrugged and said that Shinichi should have agreed if he was telling the truth. And as soon as he pressed the consent button, a window appeared in front of the frightened girl, which said that development could begin in 5 minutes, which was accompanied by a strong desire to sleep. Shinichi looked at the screen, not believing that the guy was serious with her. She tried to touch the screen with her hand, but it was intangible to her, not believing that this was happening. Then she happily suggested that it was because they had defeated the dragon, or because they had drunk the holy water. Then she went to her room to sleep, surprising the boys, and then Erna waved to them and wished them all good night. The next morning, Pero and Shinichi were already sitting at the table and waiting for their friend to wake up, rubbing their eyes sleepily. Then they looked towards Erna's room. The girl came out of her room noisily later, holding her throat and saying that her throat was dry. She then went to the kitchen and then went to the sink, starting to drink a lot of water while standing at the sink. After drinking enough water, she went to Shinichi, saying that she never thought that development could make her so thirsty. Shinichi then asked if the girl had finished developing, but she didn't know yet. The adventurer then decided to analyze the girl, putting his hand forward and using the analysis skill, noting that Erna was now much stronger and could control all the elements, as well as electricity and light. And while Shinichi looked at her characteristics in surprise, it said that she was now a pure-blooded elf, and the sorceress began to laugh ominously. And then she said, clutching her head, that Erna was one step closer to becoming a great magician. Shinichi calmly asked his friend to calm down because she was scaring Pero, who hid behind the adventurer, holding him by the shoulder. Then he asked what it meant, and Erna said that pure-blooded elves were the ancestors of modern elves. She said that long ago, the elves ruled the world with the help of special magical power. However, they began to mix with other races, which led to the loss of this magic. Then Shinichi suggested that it was not like development, but regression, and if the previous race was superior, now its development was regressing again. The girl did not understand what the adventurer was talking about, and then said with a wink that there was something more important because now a new skill was added to her magical base. Shinichi asked what kind of skill it was, to which she said that the guy should just watch how she used this power. She extended her hand with the staff forward, casting a spell, and then released the aqua ball. And this aqua ball was twice the size of a normal ball, which was a little surprising. Then Shinichi realized that it was a skill that doubled the size of magic. Then the girl made a gesture with her fingers to make the ball disappear, and explained that she wanted the aqua ball to be stronger, but if even a weak spell became so powerful, then she could freely use it on me. Pero listened to the girl sadly, looking down, and then looked at Shinichi, asking if Erna could develop, then when could he do it too? Then the adventurer explained, saying that most likely his turn would soon come. After all, Erna had developed first, since she was older than the boy, but Pero said that the girl was better than him, and that was why she had developed. He said enthusiastically, raising his hand up, that he would try and become a good child. Shinichi just smiled, crossing his arms over his chest and thinking that this way Pero would soon receive a message too. Then Erna clenched her fist firmly and said that with such strength they should have defeated the enemies and saved the city, but only the guy did not know where they were. They came to the city, where the residents were still walking around, doing their business. Looking at everything carefully, Shinichi did not see any changes in the city, thinking that everyone had calmed down. The girl did the same, and then Erna asked if they could be afraid of her. Then Shinichi thought, since the guild was closed, they would have to ask the residents. Then the boy looked to the side with interest. Freya shouted something at the strange guy about how he was untrustworthy, to which he calmly said that he had told the girl everything he knew, and if the knight wanted to know more, she needed to ask someone else. The man then left, leaving the knights without information. Gale sighed in defeat, placing his hand to his head, thinking that the two of them couldn't handle this. Then Shinichi approached them, asking if they were still looking for that person. Gale turned to the guy, remembering the adventurer. And then Gale remembered that they forgot to introduce themselves, looking at the serious Shinichi. The knight said his name was Gale, and he was the commander of Duke Medill's royal guard. Shinichi gave his name and then added that he was a farmer and the leader of a party called the Homeless. The knights remembered such a party that claimed to have destroyed the dragon Faxith, and the adventurer agreed with them. Gale thawed, frowning, and then, realizing that it was unexpected, he asked the guy for help, adding that no one should know about this work. Hearing this, Freya was taken aback. Shinichi then said seriously that he had to listen to what they had to say first, and then he would decide whether they should help the knights. Gale explained that they were currently looking for the son of the Duke and Duchess of Medill, whose name was Noven. He then looked at the adventurers, saying that they could use their help. Shinichi then asked if the guy had been kidnapped. Gale then shamefully called out that Noven had always been inclined towards adventurers, and so he left of his own accord. And their goal was to bring the boy back home as soon as possible, and, according to the information they received, someone similar to Noven accompanied the adventurer to the 30th floor of the Great Tomb Labyrinth. Then the commander seriously said that they had to protect this boy. He then noted that the homeless were frequent guests of this tomb labyrinth, and besides, they had defeated the great dragon. The knights needed the help of adventurers to protect Noven, so Shinichi asked what Noven looked like. Gale described Noven as a slender man of about 17 with his hair parted in the middle. Erna realized, as did Shinichi, that they had seen a similar guy. Freya furiously attacked the adventurer with accusations, to which the guy boredly said that it was a coincidence. Shinichi then noted that perhaps protection alone was no longer enough to solve this problem. Freya did not understand what the boy was talking about. Then the adventurer explained that it was Noven who was under the power of the succubus. And when the knights were in shock, Shinichi decided to explain everything to them. Gale realized that the succubus named Karen had the ability to charm and to break the spell they needed to defeat her. The commander said they would think about what they could do with the succubus. But he reminded them that their primary task was to protect Noven, because they could not lose a person who would become the country's pillar of strength in the future. Then he turned to Erna to find out her opinion. The sorceress said that they had to help, and suggested that Karen could be in that labyrinth. After listening to Erna's opinion, the adventurer frowned and said seriously that they and the knights were on the same path, so they decided to help in finding and protecting Noven. But then Freya entered the conversation again. She was against the adventurers working with them, pointing their weapons forward. Gale tried to calm the girl down, explaining that Shinichi and his friends knew how to get through the labyrinth, so they needed their help. But the girl was still against it, and then, pointing at Shinichi, said that if Gale hired him, he would be humiliated by having to rely on some adventurer. Shinichi was tired of listening to this girl. He closed his eyes, and then he suggested to solve this issue in another way. He suggested to Freya to arrange a battle. If the girl won, then they would reject their request. But if the guy won, then they would follow Shinichi's instructions in the labyrinth. Freya didn't believe the guy's words, because she thought the guy was joking with her, since he thought he could beat her. And then she said that his joke wasn't funny. But she accepted the adventurer's challenge, while Gale only sighed in resignation, not very happy about this idea. And as Shinichi and Freya split up to prepare for battle, Gale noted that it was a dubious idea. He warned them that their weapons were wooden and that the game would only end if the opponent admitted defeat or was no longer able to fight. Gale also warned them that this was a physical and technical match in which they could not use magic or abilities. And when he asked if they agreed with it, Freya and Shinichi agreed with them, looking at each other with determination, and gave their positive answer. The adventurer then asked the girl if she would use a sword, to which Freya replied that no matter the weapon, she should not lose to a mere adventurer. Gale raised his hand up and then waved it at her, signaling for their fight to begin. Freya immediately moved, making a dash and heading straight for Shinichi. Freya ran at the guy, swinging her sword. She wanted to hit the guy with the sword, but he quickly parried the knight's blow with one hand. But the girl did not give up. So after that, the girl quickly swung her sword again. Shinichi dodged the blow again, which the girl was unhappy about. She didn't understand why the guy wasn't going to hit her. She swung again with all her strength, but the guy parried her attack with just one hand and a loud thud without saying a word. Erna and Pero wished their friend good luck, while Gale watched Shinichi thoughtfully. He noticed that Shinichi was taking all of the girl's attacks with just one hand, and he thought that the adventurer was only using a portion of his total strength. Shinichi noticed that the girl had some skill, so in terms of pure skill, she could beat him, and then Freya ran at the guy again, saying that of course she would beat him. She swung her sword, saying that a commoner like him would not be able to match her training. Shinichi once again easily dodged her sword strike, which flew right in front of his face. The girl was a little confused by her failed attack, and then became even more angry, telling the guy to start attacking too, and only stop defending himself. She told him to stop just dodging and start fighting like a man, and the guy agreed with the girl, once again dodging her weapon. He swung, using his strength, and noticing that he was already getting bored. He then quickly struck the girl's sword, who only closed her eyes from the force of the blow. The girl's sword split in half from such a strong blow. Freya looked at the broken weapon in horror, not believing that this had happened. Gale said that their match was over and Shinichi was the winner. The adventurer then said that Freya should have kept her word. The girl just chested in annoyance, saying that knights did not go back on their word. She asked again, displeased, why they needed Shinichi's help at all. Gale was only surprised because Freya was the most experienced fighter in the royal guard. The knight then smiled and said that he relied on adventurers and believed in people like Shinichi, and Tanaka responded in kind, shaking the knight's hand. Then Gale said that they went to get ready so they could meet at the entrance of the labyrinth. And the adventurer agreed to Gale's proposal. The homeless people were walking down an empty city street. Shinichi noticed that there were fewer and fewer people on the street, and now the city looked like a ghost town. Erna agreed with the boy, saying that more and more people were going missing, so everyone was on guard. Pero noticed that all the shops were closed. The sorceress couldn't believe that this was happening to the entire city. She then asked if they had what it took to win. Shinichi smiled encouragingly and told the girl not to worry. He raised his hands, saying that he was invincible, and if he beat Karen, they would become even more famous. Erna only said that the adventurer was full of self-confidence, and Pero promised to do everything in his power. When they reached the entrance of the labyrinth, the knights were already waiting for them. Then Shinichi frowned and said that they could determine their roles in the labyrinth. The adventurer told Freya and Pero that they would command the vanguard, and they agreed. Then he said that Gale was in charge of the rear guard. Erna was supposed to be in charge of the magical support in the center. Gale realized that this way they could watch for the pincer attack. If that happened, the rear guard could switch places with the vanguard. Shinichi then said that from the 22nd floor onwards was unknown territory for them. Therefore, they did not know what kind of enemies they might encounter. He warned everyone to be prepared to switch roles at any time. He then led everyone away from the exit, which Gale did not trust. The knight then asked where the adventurer was leading them. To this, Shinichi told them to just follow him through the forest. The guy led them to the right place. Gale looked around and asked what kind of place it was. Shinichi replied that it was the Transfiguration Temple, and through this place they were going to immediately transfer to the 21st level. The knights didn't have time to say anything before they were transported to the desired floor, after which everyone was transferred to the right place, near another temple. The knights and Shinichi began to look at the situation around them. They were a little confused. Gale then asked, clarifying if they were in a labyrinth, to which Shinichi replied that they were, and they were currently on the 21st floor. The knight was at a loss for words, and then asked if they always came to this place so easily in this manner. Shinichi looked at the knight, and after a pause said that it was more like they were returning home. After all, this was the place they lived in. Freya was too surprised by the adventurer's words, while Gale just started laughing, saying that it was amazing, pressing one hand to his head and the other to his stomach. He had met many people in his life, but he never thought that some of them would end up in the dungeons. The knight was surprised at what kind of leader the homeless were. Erna, on the other hand, could not consider these words a compliment. Then the knight said that the transfer had saved them a lot of time, so he suggested that they start looking for Lord Noven. They began to move through the labyrinth, examining every corner. Then Gale noticed the place where the fire was. He realized that the remains of the fire were evidence that someone had passed through there. Pero leaned over the fire, examining it carefully. Then he said that there was a smell of 6 people there. 2 of them were women and 4 were men. Gale was surprised by Pero's sense of smell, being able to determine someone's gender just by smelling them. The boy just smiled. The knight then said that they were told that there were 5 high-level adventurers, and Noven was one of them, so they were right in their guess. So he suggested that everyone hurry up since they were on the right track. Afterwards, they went down to the 22nd floor where they saw a bamboo forest. Seeing this forest, the boy thought he was back in Japan. Then Pero asked if he could eat bamboo. Then Shinichi began to explain that the boy could only eat the one that had not yet grown. The adventurer said that first it was necessary to remove the alkali from the plant, but then he realized that Pero did not listen to him. Freya at this time looked away, seeing the rabbit. She opened her eyes wide, looking at the cute rabbit. She crouched down in front of him, holding out her hand to him, but the rabbit bit her finger viciously. Then Gale reminded the girl that they were on a mission. The knight apologized to the adventurers, saying that the girl was a great lover of animals, and of course there were moments when Freya lost her composure. Freya, hearing the words of the main one, said not to say anything because the adventurers should not know about it. Gale winked, replying that knights were supposed to be merciful, but not so much that one would become possessed by a beast that couldn't even be tamed. Shinichi then sat in front of the beast, thinking about taming the demon beast. Erna sat down next to the boy, asking if he had a suitable skill. Then Shinichi said that he could try to find one. He then began to use the taming skill on the animal, which caught the rabbit. Freya asked what the boy was doing. But then a screen appeared saying that the horned rabbit had been successfully tamed. The boy began to order the rabbit to do different commands. Shinichi then picked up the little animal while the girl looked on in shock. Freya realized that the adventurer could tame demonic beasts. Shinichi then said that this rabbit could not help them with anything, so he let him go. The knight fell to her knees in resignation, reaching for the little animal. Then Gale wanted to ask who the adventurer was, but Pero interrupted him. The boy asked if he could eat the bone that was in his hands. Shinichi and Erna were surprised that the boy had human bones in his hands and forbade him to do so. Then skeletons began to emerge from the ground, hostile towards them. Erna then said that she could erase them with her magic, but Shinichi told the girl to wait a little before attacking. The girl hit the guy, asking what he was doing. The guy just said that he had something he wanted to try. Erna admitted that she thought she was on the verge of death, to which the boy only laughed. Then he extended his hand forward, saying that the skeletons should become his familiars, and Erna confirmed her thoughts. And as the boy continued to tame the skeletons, he noticed that this time it was taking longer than before. Shinichi continued to use the skill, feeling that he had little time left. Then a window showed that the skeletons had been tamed successfully. Then there was another window that said that this was a new race of skeletons born from Shinichi's magic. The boy was surprised that the skeletons were now homeless too. Then Gale asked the adventurer if he could explain everything, and he said that he hadn't hidden anything, and then added that he could turn demons into allies. The knight just sighed. He never thought Shinichi had such a skill, and it was a bit unexpected. Freya looked at the adventurer in surprise when she learned that he could make a demon as a familiar. She remarked that it was an enviable skill. Shinichi then asked what was enviable about it. But suddenly his third eye opened. Suddenly a light appeared from it, which was directed at one of the skeletons. Then a new description of the skeleton appeared, saying that it was a homeless golden skeleton. Shinichi then thought that his third eye and their familiarity were somehow connected. The golden skeleton then said that it was nice to meet the adventurer. Shinichi smiled, saying that from now on he was their master, and so he was counting on them. Then the skeleton told the boy to give them an order. The adventurer said that the golden skeleton would be their leader, and then thought that he needed to come up with a name for him. He then suggested that the skeleton be called Skita, and the skeleton agreed to this, while Erna sighed in displeasure. Gale then approached Shinichi and asked if he would take the skeletons with him. The adventurer then smiled, saying that of course he would take them with him, since they could be a good help. They continued to advance along the 22nd floor, encountering monsters along the way. First, they encountered an ogre, which the knights dealt with. Afterwards, they began to be attacked by werewolves, who were stopped by tamed skeletons. Gale agreed that the skeletons were strong, and then Erna added with displeasure that the skeleton's bones made a lot of noise. Perot jumped on some wall and said there was a staircase there. Erna said they reached the 23rd floor. Shinichi then said that they had reached another unknown floor, hoping that there were no dangers there. As they went down to the next floor, they saw dragonflies flying past, asking if it was the 23rd floor. Shinichi said that they were in a bamboo forest at first, and now they were in a swamp, and he found it hard to believe that they were really in a labyrinth. They began to carefully move along the bridge. Shinichi looked at the insects that flew over his head, then he stretched out his hand, using the appraisal skill. The window showed that it was a large dragonfly that could only be found in this labyrinth. Also, their transparent wings could be sold at high prices as a luxury food because dragonflies were rare. Shinichi then wondered if his assessment skills were becoming more accurate, or if the rarity of D wasn't that rare. He was pulled out of his thoughts by Gale's voice, who said that they were being attacked by those insects and asked him to give them an order. Then Shinichi turned to the sorceress, who immediately understood him without words. She pointed her staff at them, and then fireballs flew with the dragonflies. The dragonflies began to quickly burn in the air, and their charred bodies began to fall down. Gale noted that even the royal court magicians could not use such a powerful spell, and they wondered who Erna was. At this time, Shinichi leaned towards the neutralized dragonfly, choosing which skill he wanted to learn. Then he thought joyfully about flying, because he could finally start flying. He chose the flying skill, and then decided to try it out immediately. After the forehead, he rose a few centimeters from the ground. He thoughtfully looked below himself. Could he use this skill whenever he wanted? Behind him stood Erna and Pero, who were surprised by their friend's new skill. They did not believe that the guy was floating, and then Pero added that it sounded fun. And while Erna was telling Pero that their friend was floating just a few centimeters off the ground, Shinichi noticed movement in the water. Then a frog's head emerged from the water, then it pointed its tongue towards the boy. Shinichi caught the animal's tongue, realizing that the frog had wanted to attack him while he was distracted. He then pulled the animal towards himself, after which a window appeared with a description of the frog, which said that it was a delicacy in some circles. The girls looked at the frog in amazement, and then Shinichi threw it onto the bridge to stab it with his sword. After that, the animal was defeated. Shinichi pointed his hand at the frog again to select a skill. The sign showed whether the guy wanted to choose underwater adaptation. Then, the adventurer thought that this skill could be useful to him. He got another skill, and then thought with horror that he was becoming so strong. Then Erna distracted him from his thoughts, saying that they had to leave there. But Shinichi said that they had to cut up the frog, because its meat was a delicacy. Hearing this, the sorceress grabbed her head, saying that she did not want to hear anything about frog meat. To this, Shinichi only said that she didn't have to eat it if she didn't like it. Then they continued their way through the swamp. And as they continued walking, Erna noticed something ahead. She thought it was a rock. Then Pero told her friend that this big rock smelled like a frog. Then Shinichi excitedly told them, no matter what, not to move. They were looking at the large eyes of a frog, which was many times larger than the adventurers and knights themselves. Then the adventurers looked at the monster with fear, then turned around and ran away from the frog as fast as they could. When they had run a sufficient distance, they stopped. Erna noticed that the road was completely blocked. Shinichi didn't understand what kind of giant bullfrog it was. He then suggested that it could be dealt with using magic, but Erna asked her friend not to speak so simply. The girl explained that if the magic got out of control, the bridge could collapse, and if they ended up in a swamp, they would become prey for other demons. But the boy understood that they could not continue in the same spirit. That's why he said they didn't have to kill her because they could have just made her back off. Then Freya distracted them and said that she wanted to participate in this. Shinichi looked at the knight and then agreed with her. Then he suggested that Erna attack with her magic first, after which they should create a diversion with Freya and Pero. And after that, when the frog was distracted, Shinichi was supposed to break through the gap and kill it. He asked if everything was clear, to which everyone responded in agreement. They looked at the giant frog with determination. Erna was the first to act, using the rock Barrett, which sent large chunks of rock flying into the air and flying straight at the frog. After Erna's attack, Pero and Freya ran towards the monster. They jumped on the disoriented frog, who didn't know where to look. Pero used his claws that Shinichi bought and then jumped to the side. Freya then shouted that the boy had done a great job and that she could now deal with him herself, swinging her weapon. The frog noticed the girl, and then the adventurer shouted for the girl to get away from there. But then the monster aimed its tongue straight at the knight, who didn't expect it. Suddenly, Pero appeared next to her, pushing Freya aside. So instead, the frog grabbed the boy. Shinichi watched as the monster swallowed his younger friend. He then used his ice breath, immobilizing the monster. He jumped at her, swinging his sword. Then, with a scream, he struck the monster with his weapon, cutting the frog into two parts, and the monster's body began to fall into the swamp. Shinichi jumped on the frog and then began to cut its body to get the boy out of its stomach. Pero coughed and then said it was sticky and disgusting. The adventurer breathed a sigh of relief when he saw his comrade. They got out onto the bridge. Then the guy started turning towards the guilty girl. He furiously asked why the girl decided to attack, because it was not part of their plan. Then the guy asked if this was how she wanted to prove that she was more important, since her arbitrariness almost cost him the life of his companion. The girl looked away guiltily and just wanted to explain how Gale addressed Shinichi. He said that when they got back, he would apologize for what happened, but for now, they had to forget about it. Shinichi clenched his teeth in anger, and then turned to Sket to remove the corpse from the bridge. Erna then turned to the boy, saying that they needed to get out of this place. The boy agreed, saying that he didn't want to fight again. He then looked in surprise at the opened sign, which said about the report. The boy had completed the prerequisites, and now the skills could be integrated and developed. Shinichi was surprised that his skills could develop. Then he saw that these skills were integrated from one to the other. He looked at the signs in confusion, then thought that Erna's skills should have developed too, and then asked if this happened often. Erna only thought skeptically that she could become stronger. Then the girl said that some of the skills developed naturally with mastery, and so it was not unusual for talentless people to remain at the initial stages of their skill even after 30 years. Then Shinichi understood his friend's words, but then a golden skeleton came to him, calling for an adventurer. Sketa said that they found a staircase to the next floor. Tanaka then praised them for their excellent work. They went down to the 24th floor, where a beautiful view of the mountains in the distance was visible. Erna looked at the place with delight, where there was clean air and beautiful landscapes, and then she noted that if she ever wanted to build a vacation home, which would definitely be in this place. She then said that she could finally wash herself, since she had been feeling uncomfortable all this time. Shinichi checked the area with the skill, and then said that there was no enemy presence nearby. And then he suggested setting up camp in this place, which Gale did not mind. Then a boy approached the adventurer. He happily showed him a large crayfish he had found. Then he said there were a lot of fish in that place. Then Shinichi suggested making a net and catching more fish for dinner. The adventurer used the skill of making a thread, which became a net, and then added that all that was left for him to do was make a harpoon. Erna said she would go and cook something for them, and Gale decided that he and Freya should go get some dry branches. Shinichi told them that he was counting on them. And so Shinichi and Pero came to the pond. They sat down by the river, and then Tanaka said that they should dive in. The boy and the adventurer began to dive into the water. Thanks to the skill underwater adaptation, Shinichi could easily move underwater without any difficulty. They swam up to the fish, after which the guy caught the fish with a harpoon. Pero made a gesture that the guy was a good guy. After a while, they caught quite a lot of fish. Pero laughed, noting that they had a big catch. Erna met them at the camp. She then told the boys to cut the fish into pieces and put them in a spherical pot. The boy didn't understand what she was talking about. The girl then pointed at an object that was hovering near Shinichi, who was surprised by this magic. The girl then explained that everything didn't fit in the pot, so she used fire and water spells, and Tanaka noted that it was very convenient. Afterwards, the guy realized that this was the development of the girl's skills, and then he said that now she was worthy of being a cook for the homeless. The girl just smiled, asking if it was great. Later, when the food was ready and poured into plates, they began to eat. Everyone was eating the prepared food with gusto when Gale said that he never thought that he would be treated to such food on a mission. He continued to chew the food, saying that the meat had a slight aftertaste that was simply wonderful. Erna agreed with the knight that the meat was very tasty, and then said that she threw it in without first knowing what it was. Then the knight replied with a smile on his face that he had eaten frog meat from time to time, but it was the first time it tasted so good. Hearing the boy's words, she spat out the food. Freya and Erna realized that it was the meat of that frog, but they did not understand how it got there, because Erna did not remember adding it. They then looked at the satisfied Shinichi, who continued to eat the food. He then asked if the meat wasn't tasty, to which Erna replied in the negative. Then night fell. Everyone was sleeping by the fire, except Freya and Shinichi, who were guarding them at that time. Pouring the drink into a mug, he turned to Freya, asking if she wanted some, saying it tasted good. The girl continued to stand with her back to the boy, refusing the drink, saying she was fine and wanted to focus on the patrol. Then, after a short silence, she turned to the guy and said that she needed to talk to Shinichi about something. Shinichi looked at the silent girl, sitting on a log and holding a mug of drink in his hands. He then asked what she wanted to talk about, slowly sipping the drink from the cup. The girl clenched her fists and then apologized for that incident. It was her fault that she thought she could handle the monster herself. Then Shinichi said, looking at her again, if she wanted to apologize, then she should have apologized to Pero. After all, the adventurer simply told her what he noticed while watching her. Then he added that he could understand the girl, who looked away, why she decided to act on her own, because the frog was still scared. The boy didn't have time to finish his sentence when Freya said that it was still a bad decision. She got down on one knee, placing her hand over her heart, apologizing for insulting the adventurer by calling him a mere adventurer. Shinichi just sighed, closing his eyes and saying that the girl didn't have to worry about it. He looked at her and said that he understood that she was quite a serious person, and the girl apologized again for being that kind of person. Shinichi looked at the fire in which the wood was crackling, and then said that there were no signs of an enemy in this area, and then we will offer the knight to sit by the fire for a minute. The girl sat down next to the guy on a log, hiding her hands under her knees, thereby hugging herself. And then she said that her parents were not really aristocrats, but they were quite famous adventurers. Shinichi thought about it. He didn't even understand it because she was with Gale all the time. Then the girl smiled, saying that she was only a commoner, so the guy should understand her. Then she said that her parents left this world when she was 7 years old, and then a year later her grandmother left her due to illness, and then she sadly said that she then became an orphan. The boy then asked the girl how she had managed to survive on her own as a child, and Freya smiled awkwardly and said that she had lived in the slums of the capital. The slums were constantly dumping the city's garbage, and if she could look hard enough, she could find some scraps of food. Freya lived off what she could get her hands on, rummaging through the trash cans. The guy thought that he couldn't help, but it was interesting to hear about it from someone like him, remembering his not-so-best years of his past life. Then the girl said that once she saved a boy of noble birth who had wandered into the slums, and he cried loudly, wiping away his tears. And that boy was Lord Noven. Then the girl led him by the hand to the mansion, and in exchange for saving him, he gave her clothes, food, and shelter, and then asked her to become his personal knight. The girl said sadly that Noven was the one who pulled her out of the slums and raised her as a knight. She looked at the fire and understood that if she had not met him then, she would not be where she was now. But she still hated her parents, who left her then, leaving her alone, because if they had not been adventurers, then perhaps her family would have lived happily ever after. Now Shinichi understood, looking at the girl, why Freya treated adventurers like that. Then the girl added that she felt like she had lost not only her parents, but also a friend. Then she apologized to Shinichi again. The boy also apologized to her in his mind, closing his eyes, because now it was no longer surprising why she hated adventurers so much. Then he told her out loud not to worry, and now they could work together to find Noven. Then the girl thanked the guy again, promising that one day she would repay him for everything he had done for her, and then said that in any case, she wanted to change the subject. Suddenly, she asked Shinichi if Pero was his son, to which the guy immediately nervously said that this was not the case at all. The girl wasn't surprised, since Shinichi and Pero didn't look alike. Then Shinichi said that they accepted him into the group because he didn't have parents. And now, as his adoptive father, Shinichi was serious about taking care of him. Then Freya smiled and said that the boy was clearly better than he seemed, to which the adventurer said that the girl could despise Pero or praise him. Shinichi then began to think, looking forward, that after getting to know Freya better, he realized that she was a problematic female knight. Then the girl distracted him from his thoughts again, asking shyly if she could touch Pero's tail. Shinichi allowed her to do so, as long as she didn't wake him up. He hoped it wasn't to satisfy her strange interests, but Freya stood up and said she was just curious about the boy's bushy tail. She quietly sat down in front of the boy's tail, and then began to look at the tail with interest and some strange concern, when her hands were already trembling from the desire to touch the tail. Then the girl suddenly pressed her cheek to the tail, thinking that she had known about it, and her eyes had not deceived her when she thought that the tail was soft, touching the fur with her fingers. Then a noise was heard, which made Shinichi immediately stand up abruptly. He felt that he had been detected by using a skill, and then a menacing cry was heard again, after which Freya and Shinichi looked in the right direction. Shinichi told Freya to wake everyone up because the enemy was approaching. The girl understood the guy and his order. Then he called the golden skeleton, who immediately appeared behind the owner, listening to him attentively. He opened the map, turning his head from side to side and asking where the enemy was, to which he was told that he was above. The silhouette of a giant bird approaching appeared in the sky. The bird flapped its wide wings and then landed in front of Shinichi, making loud sounds. Then Erna shouted at the boy, warning him to be careful because it was a griffin. Flames began to appear from the monster's mouth, which were immediately directed at the adventurer who was using the shield, saying that he heard her when the flames recoiled from the shield. Shinichi then ordered the familiars to grab the griffin. They understood the boy's order, and then stood in a line, and then extended their arms and used their chains. The skeletons began to wrap their magic chains around the monster, who tried to break free from his bonds, screaming loudly. Shinichi did not understand where his skeletons got the chains from. Then Erna assumed that they were shadow chains from dark magic. The boy was pleased with this, and then he extended his hand and used the taming skill on the beast, telling the skeletons to hold him back until he got the result. Afterwards, a taming school appeared, which started showing the loading of his taming, and Shinichi thought that it was moving too slowly. Then he had another plan, smiling, took a step towards the monster, to which the sorceress asked the guy to be careful. The adventurer approached the monster, stretched out his hands to the feathers, and began to stroke the griffin, offering this method of taming. He continued to stroke the monster, finding its weak spots. The taming scale began to fill quickly, and the griffin rumbled contentedly from the touch. Shinichi then promised that if the griffin joined his group, he would do this every day, continuing to scratch the beast's feathers. Erna then said discontentedly that this would not make the griffin join them. And after a little while, the taming was successfully completed, after which the griffin's eyes sparkled. The guy folded his arms on his chest and looked at the griffin that was created by Shinichi and was now a member of his family, with a C-class rarity. Pero looked at the beast with admiration and then approached Shinichi, asking if he could touch the griffin. Shinichi was about to allow the boy to do so, but Freya, with glowing eyes, was already running towards the griffin at full speed, quickly overtaking Pero. She began to pet and scratch the animal, then she laughed, saying that it was cool and fluffy. Erna noticed that the girl's character had changed a little, but Shinichi reminded her that the knight loved animals, but because of the mission she had to restrain herself. Gale looked at the griffin and couldn't believe that an adventurer could get such a magical beast. Then Shinichi smiled and replied that he simply put the griffin under his command with his skills. The knight then suggested that any of the magical beasts could become part of Shinichi's team, even one like the succubus. But Shinichi immediately refuted the succubus suggestion, saying that it was impossible. Gale then thought that if they could get a few more of these griffins, they could use them as transportation. Shinichi thought about the knight's words, as he liked the knight's suggestion. The adventurer then said that everyone should pack their things, because they were going to go after another griffin. To this statement, Erna was displeased that they should have already left. They began to move through the forest in search of another griffin. Shinichi looked around, noticing that there was definitely no griffin in the forest. Then Erna said that she was tired of walking. Then Gale said that he was sorry that it was easy for them, because they were happy Freya, looking around, riding on a tamed griffin. But Shinichi said that they should not think about it, because the knights were their clients. Pero, who was walking ahead and looking for something, called out to the adventurer, who immediately looked in his direction, saying that he had found something. They looked at the broken wheel. Erna said it was interesting, noting that it looked old. Then they noticed the broken cart, realizing that the adventurers who had been to this place had been on it. Then the boy froze, rubbing his chin, having come up with an idea. He told the boys that they needed boards, but Erna already guessed what her friend was going to do, so she didn't want the boy to say those words. He then used his spinning skill to use the thread as glue, causing web threads to emerge from his fingers, causing the sorceress to say that she was not pleased that he was trying to fix the carriage. After a while, a cart with skeletons was ready, glued together with the same threads. Erna immediately said that she did not want to ride on it because it did not even look like a carriage. At this time, Pero noted that it looked funny. Shinichi began to pull the dissatisfied and resisting Erna into the carriage, but she did not want to get in, while the knights sat on the griffin and waited for them to continue their journey. And when she finally sat down, Shinichi gave the order for the skeletons to quickly move from their place, and the carriage moved off. Erna screamed with tears in her eyes and begged them to stop the cart, holding tightly to the wooden side and also warning that it could kill her. Pero only smiled cheerfully, and Shinichi, crossing his arms, looked ahead at the road with satisfaction. But the cart continued to roll forward at full speed. Then she said that her hips hurt because of it. Next to the cart, the griffin also ran quickly. After a while, having passed through the entire forest, they reached the stairs that led them to the 25th floor. They immediately went down to the next lower floor, meeting a large sown field. Shinichi's eyes and mouth widened in surprise. He looked at the plants, and then happily said, walking into these fields and running his hands over the ears of grain, that this was rice, and this was exactly what he wanted. He was glad that they could now eat rice, imagining in their minds a bowl of cooked, hot rice. Ernie looked at the adventurer and wondered what could make Shinichi happy. Then Freya wondered if a simple plant could turn someone into a child. And Pero also didn't understand the adventurer as he looked at Shinichi. Then Gale told Freya not to be absurd. It could just be a hallucinogenic plant. Then Shinichi overheard them and thought about what kind of horror that night could have said, and then he thought about it and realized that they didn't know what rice was. He looked up ahead, noticing something. He quickly called the guys to him, who looked at him, after which they went towards the temple, which was similar to the temples that had been before at the entrance to the labyrinth and on the 21st floor. A group of people approached the stone, examining it. Shinichi noted that it was undoubtedly a temple for transference. Erna said that it was on the 25th floor. Then he thought, could they use it? The adventurer touched the stone, after which the tablet showed that he could now use this precise movement, so Shinichi said that everything worked fine. Shinichi put his hands on Erna's shoulders and happily said that now they could return to the 25th floor at any time and would be able to collect as much rice as they wanted. But Erna didn't understand what the guy was talking about. Gale then approached the adventurer and asked if there was a connection between this place and the entrance to the labyrinth, and Shinichi assumed that there was. He then said that the way home was now open to them, but for now they had to continue their search. They continued their journey in a cart pulled by skeletons. Erna then turned to her friend and asked if they could catch up with Devon. Shinichi then crossed his arms thoughtfully and said that they were taking the shortest route, so they should catch up with him soon. Then Sketa said that there was a staircase ahead, to the next floor, and the boy turned around, saying that he understood him and nodded. They went down to the 26th floor, which had a depressing and gloomy atmosphere. Then Erna noticed that they were back in the normal area, which looked like a real labyrinth. Gale looked forward carefully, taking hold of the hilt of his sword and saying that he could have taken the front, otherwise he wouldn't have felt good being in the rear as the commander of the knights. Shinichi agreed with the knight, but then he felt that danger had been detected, grabbing his sword. There were dark silhouettes walking ahead of them, so they decided and said that they had to act quickly. A large group of living dead were walking towards them, wearing torn and old clothes, stretching their hands towards the adventurers and knights. Shinichi noticed that it looked like a greeting. Then Gale held his sword forward and said that the zombies were a real problem, and until they destroyed their heads, the zombies would continue to attack. Erna hid behind the knight, fearfully saying that she couldn't kill the zombies. Pero did the same, noting that these dead people looked creepy. Gale nervously told them not to use him as a shield. Shinichi then told everyone to get out of the way, taking his sword and spinning the ball in the hilt of his sword. After that, the weapon caught fire, with which Shinichi tried to burn the dead, who screamed in pain. The adventurer frowned and thought that this was hard to put up with, so he told Sketa and the other skeletons to hurry up, and Sketa went to deal with it. After that, his familiars began to neutralize the zombies, engaging them in a fight and causing them great damage. And while they were dealing with some, Erna noticed another large group of undead approaching them, warning Shinichi about it. The adventurer realized that there were many undead on this floor. Erna glanced sideways at the approaching skeletons, noting that there were too many of them, so she didn't know what to do now. Then Shinichi smiled and told the girl to relax, raising her hand to chest level, because each of those skeletons was very weak and raised their hand. He then pointed it towards the attacking skeletons, saying that he could take control of them and then use taming. He ran down the hallway and began taming the skeletons, telling them to join him. And when Shinichi found a group of skeletons, he used taming. He then continued to walk forward, making every skeleton his ally. He held his arms out to the sides, commanding the skeletons to join him. And when they were all tamed and subdued by the adventurer, Shinichi laughed as he sat in the carriage, stretching his hand up and telling everyone to greet his army of 200 strongest skeletons, raising his sword up. Pero raised his hand happily and said that Shinichi was cool and now looked like a king, but Erna looked at it appraisingly and said that she didn't see anything cool about it. Gale wondered if Shinichi had forgotten why they were all gathered here. Freya, holding a weapon in her hands, noted that these skeletons were somehow strange. Shinichi then said enthusiastically that they would continue on their way, but that the skeletons would now go ahead of them. The adventurer swung his sword forward, ordering the skeletons to go, after which his large and slightly creepy army obeyed his word. They began to move further along the floor. The army of skeletons that went ahead of them neutralized all hostile evil spirits in their path, paving a safe path for their master and his friends. Shinichi was happy about this and then told them to move on. He thought that this would get rid of all the zombies. Pero and Erna looked forward with interest. The adventurers were surrounded by skeleton guards, so they safely finished their journey through the floor when Shinichi raised his sword up, and having finished their adventure through the 26th floor, they had already reached the 27th floor. Shinichi crouched down and noticed that it was very dark there, so Erna decided to use light magic to make it more comfortable for them to continue on their way. And now, thanks to this light, they could continue on their way, looking carefully around, examining the corridor. After a while, Erna froze and noticed that there was space ahead. At this time, Pero began to sniff the air. Then Pero called Shinichi, saying that he smelled the scent of 6 people and someone else. Suddenly, a voice was heard. Shiro then heard someone screaming, so they needed to know what the screams were, so they headed towards the sound, down the corridor lit by Erna's magic. A few minutes later, they came to the place where they heard the sound. They saw the girl pressing the guy against the column, and next to them lay the unconscious bodies of other men. Karen sighed and then smiled, thanking the adventurers for their work, still holding the weakened boy by the neck. Karen smiled innocently at the adventurers who came. Erna looked at the succubus carefully, recognizing her as that very Karen. Then Shinichi realized that this was the same girl who despised the city of Marna. Watching as the girl let go of the weakened body of the guy, she began to walk towards them. The succubus smiled, showing her long fangs, hiding her hands behind her back, and then said that she was waiting for them on the 30th floor, but she couldn't resist, so she came to this floor. As Karen had thought, they had taken the bait of Noven, and she was curious to see what would happen if she lured them to the end of the maze. Freya was about to go to Noven to bring him back to consciousness, but Gale stopped her. Then Shinichi turned to his comrades and said that they needed to buy time to get the victims out of this place. Then the adventurer turned to Ern and Pero, who were ready to attack or defend themselves at any moment, looking resolutely towards the succubus. They looked at Karen, who was sweetly saying that it was somehow cowardly of them towards a weak girl if they started attacking her with 3 of them, but without listening to the succubus any further, the adventurers moved forward, attacking Karen. Erna used fireballs towards Karen, covering her friends. Her magic flew towards the succubus, who continued to stand in one place, after which she began to disappear, continuing to smile. The adventurers stopped, surprised by this, but then the demon appeared behind Erna, calmly saying that she was behind the frightened sorceress. And while Erna was confused, Shinichi and Pero ran towards her when the succubus's clawed hand swung at the sorceress, who only managed to close her eyes. And when Karen swung her claws with a sly smile, cutting the air, Shinichi managed to push Erna aside. Then Karen shared that succubi could move. Shinichi angrily clenched his teeth, holding his friend by the back, after which Pero said that they couldn't let Karen use the movement here again. Everyone was ready to attack again when the boy told Shinichi that he could have done it by rushing forward. He attacked the succubus using a storm continuous attack, delivering his quick strikes which made the succubus frown, defending with one hand. Karen then tried to get away from the attacks of the boy who wanted to chase her, but Shinichi himself advanced on the girl, swinging his sword. He struck, but the succubus barely managed to stop the blow, with her clawed hand and a loud metallic sound. She gritted her teeth and cursed as she saw the adventurer swing his leg as hard as he could, telling her to leave this world before kicking her in the stomach as hard as he could. The impact sent her flying backwards, making a coughing sound, and then she hit the wall with her back. Shinichi then turned to Ern. She pointed her weapon towards the succubus and immediately used her advanced magic. After that, large pieces of rocks began to gather in the air above the girl. All these stones gathered into the desired shape, after which Erna used the stone hammer, which was instantly directed at Karen, who began to cover herself from the stones. But the stone hammer hit the place where the monster stood with force. This hammer was slightly destroyed in the places where it touched the floor. Huge boulders of stones covered the succubus, after which the adventurers silently looked at the boulder without saying a word. Afterwards, Erna happily said that she was capable of many things now. Shinichi thought that it took longer than he thought, putting his sword back in its sheath. Then he asked Gale about the immobilized people. The knight, who was sitting in front of the unconscious body, said that 5 people were unconscious, and Noven was also fine. Freya leaned over to Noven excitedly, trying to wake the boy up. Then the adventurer handed the mushroom to the knight, telling them to give it to Noven, and then he would wake up. Gale looked closely at the medicinal mushroom, and then thanked Shinichi, who told him not to worry about it. Shinichi said that everything was decided. Thinking that their mission was finished, Erna said that she would take a long, relaxing bath when they returned home. Then she remembered. And looking at the skeletons, the girl asked what Shinichi was going to do with his large army of skeletons. Then Shinichi simply said that he wanted to take them with him, leaving the sorceress confused and indignant. Then he thought about sending the skeletons to work on the farm, but Erna was against it. Then, as they stood toward the exit, moving away from the stones, the sorceress said that it was too much for all of them. Then Erna gasped, remembering that she herself did not want to take care of the farm. Suddenly, the mountain of stones began to fly apart. The adventurers turned around in surprise. Karen smiled evilly, asking if they thought they could stop her. She then flew up in her new form and sighed, adding, pointing her claws at them, that they ruined the nice atmosphere she was creating. She glared at the adventurers who didn't understand what the girl was talking about, throwing rocks at them. Then Gale, protecting Noven from the rocks, shouted at Freya to get Noven and the others out of there. The adventurer frowned and gritted his teeth, not understanding what kind of pressure it was, and then he stretched out his hand and used the appraisal skill, which said that Karen was a half-vampire and half-succubus who had many skills. Then he told all this to Erna, who did not believe his words that Karen was also a vampire. But then she looked at Karen, who continued to hang in the air with her claws hidden behind her back, and said that among all the monsters, vampires were classified as a disaster class. And Karen smiled contentedly and agreed with Ernu's words, and then said with a grin that she was a hybrid of a succubus and a vampire. She then added that as compensation for the fact that they had angered her, she had to drink their blood. Lightning appeared from her outstretched hand. Then drawings appeared on the floor, from which the girl called her familiars, who began to emerge as people who were her servants. And so, against the adventurers stood a large crowd of hypnotized men who were hostile to the homeless, holding weapons in their hands. Then, holding his sword forward, Shinichi said that these were the citizens of Marna who were kidnapped. Karen laughed evilly while still in the air, and then ordered her familiars to destroy the adventurers who were thinking about whether there was a way to rid the villagers of the evil energy that resided in their bodies. The adventurers were surrounded by hypnotized people who began to come closer and closer to them. Then Karen, holding her head with one hand, smiled and said to begin their blood festival. Erna looked at the hypnotized crowd, and Karen flying in the air, asking Shinichi what they were supposed to do, since there were about 100 of Karen's familiars. The adventurer just smiled resolutely, telling the girl not to worry. Then he turned back to where his familiars stood, addressed the skeletons, asking if they knew what they had to do now, to which they responded in agreement. The boy extended his hand forward, directing his large army of skeletons, which began to head towards the enemies to help their master. Shinichi then looked towards the knights and shouted at Gale to evacuate all the wounded. Gale agreed with the adventurer's decision. But then Freya called the knight. She asked for forgiveness for her selfishness, but then she asked for permission to let her fight Karen. Gale wanted to explain to her that the difference in their strength was too great, because the girl was not strong enough for such a fight. The girl gripped the weapon tighter in her hand, saying that she had made her decision, and she understood that she could die. And despite this, she wanted to fight for the honor of her duke. Gale just frowned, closing his eyes and considering his decision. He looked at the girl, realizing that she would not back down, so he would not argue with her. Freya then walked up and addressed Shinichi, who turned to her. She had her weapon drawn and said that she didn't know how much she could help, but she wanted to do everything she could, and the boy agreed with her. Karen shouted at her servants to attack and destroy the adventurers, showing how loyal they were to her. They ran towards them, screaming. Then Shinichi ordered his skeletons, pointing forward, to buy them as much time as possible, but not to kill anyone, and the skeleton army understood his order. And so the two armies were noisily directed against each other to carry out the orders of their masters. The man swung his sword and hit the skeleton, causing the sword to split in half without harming the skeleton in any way. He looked at his weapon in confusion and surprise, and then at the skeleton, whose bones were sparkling. The battle continued. One of the skeletons grabbed the man's sword when he wanted to attack him, then hit the man in the stomach with his bony fist. Another skeleton, from his knee, hit another man. Skita circled around, disarming several of Karen's servants at once. The Keylets were one step ahead of defeating Karen's servants, disarming the hypnotized people. Shinichi glanced at them, then smiled contentedly, looking at the battle, and then noted, telling the succubus that his skeletons were stronger than her servants. The girl pretended to cry, pressing her fists to her face, saying that she had tried so hard to summon her servants, who were unable to do anything, and then added that she was so shocked that she could burst into tears. She then said that she was joking, using magic and banishing into thin air, leaving the adventurer alone. Shinichi sensed something was wrong and then held his sword in front of him, preventing the girl's claws from slashing with his sword. Then the girl said that those people were, after all, disposable, and if she could take control of Marna, she could replenish her supplies as much as she wanted. She then smiled, still holding onto the boy's sword, adding that she wanted to have Shinichi as her familiar, who frowned and thanked her for that. He then added that he had no desire to become a monster's servant. The adventurer continued to defend himself with all his might from the girl with his sword, cursing as he looked at the girl's claws. Then Karen looked to the side at the noise, from where Pero was already running at her with all his might, aiming at the girl. He jumped at the hybrid, swinging his claws, but she was able to dodge the determined boy's attack. She then swung her knee, telling the boy to get out of her sight. The boy's eyes widened in surprise. She kicked Pero in the stomach, crossing her arms over her chest and telling the boy, who was flying from the blow, that she hated children. The feather fell to the floor, and then rolled across it, flying to the knee near Erna and Freya. The girls and Shinichi looked in the direction of the boy's fall and excitedly called out to Pero. Freya looked at the unconscious boy with an angry frown, then she took off running and ran towards Karen, holding her weapon at the ready, asking how the succubus dared to do this. The succubus frowned at the knight because she was unhappy that the girl began to attack her, and then said that Freya was boring her. So she used magic, stretching her hand towards the girl, launching a sphere at Freya. Freya froze from the monster's action. The sphere released by the girl flew towards the knight, after which it exploded with a great noise, touching Freya. The monster screamed, then chuckled, and then said that she accidentally killed the knight, feigning an apology for it, putting her palm to her head. But Shinichi calmly said that there was no need to apologize, looking at the succubus as he began to flutter in different directions. He sat next to the knight and covered Freya with his body near the collapsed brick columns that were covered with cracks, hugging her by the shoulders, and then added that it was not an attack that was difficult to block. Karen smiled, looking at the adventurer with interest, realizing that the guy could cancel the magic. She said that now the time for games was over. And then she warned that she wanted to get rid of them one by one. When the adventurers listened to her attentively, she teleported again. Suddenly, smiling contentedly, Karen appeared behind Erna, who didn't even have time to react. And then, swinging her claws quite hard, the succubus struck the sorceress's back with her claws. The girl fell to the floor with her injured back as Karen said that Erna was first in line, looking at her dirty, sharp claws. The succubus stepped on the girl's wounded back, who screamed in pain, saying that Erna was stupid because Karen had been kind enough to her when she let her go last time. Then Shinichi frowned and called out to Erna, instantly using the thread skill and releasing them towards the succubus. Shinichi's threads immediately bound the monster. At this time, Freya moved and ran towards Karen, and then swung her weapon, aiming at Karen, who tried to get out of the bonds. And when Freya was very close to the succubus, she pointed the weapon at the girl, using Meteor Strike, getting very close to the monster. Then both girls froze when Freya missed. The knight's eyes widened in surprise, and then cleared her throat. Karen got there first, saying that Freya was just an obstacle in her way. Looking boredly at the girl, she pulled out her claws, which she managed to hit the girl right in the chest. Then she asked the girl to be quiet. After all, she wanted to drink her blood later. The monster laughed, licking her claw, looking with her condescending gaze at the wounded girl. Now, it was clear that Feather was sitting weakened near one of the columns, lowering his head down, feeling the pain of defeat. Erna was lying unconscious on the floor of the labyrinth, with a serious wound on her back. Freya was also lying, like a girl, with her back stained with her own blood, also not regaining consciousness. The girl flew higher to the ceiling and noticed that now Shinichi, who was looking at her, was left completely alone. Then she noticed, looking at the adventurer, that despite this, Shinichi could not only cancel magic, but also use other skills. Smiling at the guy, she began to disappear again, saying that he was interesting. Then she reappeared, but only next to the guy, flying behind the tense adventurer. She said that because of this, she would make the boy her most beloved familiar, after which she began to use taming on the adventurer, who covered his face, realizing that things were not going well for him. The girl continued to use magic on Shinichi when the taming scale began to show a loading screen of how far she had progressed in taming Shinichi. The girl thought that now the guy could become his familiar, and Shinichi would belong only to her. The guy closed his eyes, thinking that this dark stream of negative emotions from Karen was strong and dense. He gritted his teeth, thinking that he had accumulated enough psychological resistance over 56 years, so Karen should not underestimate his strength. Karen noticed the boy's attempts to resist her magic, and then she remarked that she had never met anyone who was as troublesome as Shinichi, and then she asked if the adventurer really didn't want to become part of her family. And Shinichi replied that, of course, he didn't want to join the girl because he lived only for himself. He stood up from his knees, defying Kari's skills, saying that this was what made him Tanaka Shinichi, who was homeless. The girl covered her face with her hands as the light appeared, protecting herself. He then used familiar transformation on himself, clenching his fists, causing the girl's magic to be dispelled, flying apart. The taming scale fell to the floor and shattered completely. It looked at the man who had transformed into a familiar in confusion, then it flew away to a distance away from the adventurer. The guy laughed, telling him to dispel her magic so she wouldn't be able to stop him now. The girl clenched her teeth, clicked her tongue, and angrily swung her claws, and then paused, thinking about how much energy she had spent on some person, looking at the adventurer. At this time, Pero had already come to his senses, standing up from the floor and adjusting his gloves, and then loudly called out to his friend. The boy decisively moved from his place towards the succubus, shouting to Shinichi that he had helped the others. The girl looked at Pero, who was running towards her, then began to attack Karen, delivering her quick blows, from which the girl could only defend herself. At this time, Pero furiously shouted at the girl that he would never forgive her for causing pain to everyone. Karen thought again with displeasure that she hated children, but she did not understand why she felt disgust towards Pero, covering herself from his attacks. And while Pero distracted Karen, Shinichi quickly approached the injured girls, feeding them a medicinal mushroom. Erna opened her eyes with force, and then she sat up, holding her head and not understanding where she was. Freya came to her senses after her, and they sat up confusedly, and Shinichi asked how the girls felt. Freya looked in surprise at the place on her armor where her wound should have been, but it was no longer there, to which she heard that it was the effect of the medicinal mushroom. Remembering, Erna asked her friend where Karen was, and Shinichi replied that the battle was still going on, looking in the direction where the succubus was. He looked over to where the boy was, trying not to get hit by the attacks of the monster that was running after him, noting that Pero had bought them a little time, but it wouldn't last long. Freya clenched her teeth and fists in frustration, thinking that if she had more strength, she would have helped them. Erna asked Shinichi if there was anything she could do about it. Shinichi then replied seriously and decisively that they could increase their abilities and defeat Karen, so he wanted to try the acupuncture point skill again. The sorceress was frightened as she took hold of her staff and asked if it would hurt again like last time. Freya, hearing the sorceress's fears, was surprised that it hurt. The guy started looking for this skill on the menu screen, not finding it in the list, and then realized that this skill had evolved into life force, finding it on the screen and clicking on it. He then asked the frightened and doubtful girls, who did not trust him, to turn their backs to him. Erna was dead set against it, pressing her hands to her chest. Freya thought the same, to which Shinichi said that they didn't have much time. The girls knelt down with doubt, awkwardly exchanging glances, after which, using the life force skill, Shinichi found the necessary points on the girls' bodies, which were clearly visible on their lower backs. After that, Shinichi pressed them simultaneously and gently. The girls were surprised, rising from their knees as magic appeared around them. The girls looked at their hands in surprise. Erna noticed that it didn't hurt at all, looking at the magic that swirled around her. Freya suddenly felt, realizing that she had become even stronger, squeezing her hand into a fist. Shinichi explained to the girls that after evolution, this skill became without drawbacks. Erna noted that they now had a chance to win, but the adventurer asked the girl to wait, because now was not the time to rush. He reminded them that Karen could use teleportation to hide from them, so he suggested that the girls attack at the same time, not going far from each other, and watch, covering each other's backs. After listening to the adventurer's instructions, the girls resolutely headed towards the succubus, clutching their weapons in their hands. The girls then shouted at Pero, who continued to fight off Karen and looked towards the girls to come back. Erna used the wind cutter, aiming it right towards Karen, who was surprised by this, causing Karen to back away from the boy, who jumped to the side. Then the succubus, frowning, turned to the sorceress and was surprised that Erna was alive. To this, Erna, smiling, responded that it was not so easy to defeat her as a future archmage. At this time, Freya, having rushed from her place, began to confidently attack the monster, swinging her weapon to strike the succubus. Freya began to strike quickly towards the demon, trying to inflict as much damage as possible, from which Karen barely had time to dodge. Freya then aimed her weapon again, looking at Karen, and when she swung it, the girl was able to attack Karen, causing one of her horns to be damaged, causing the succubus to scream at this turn of events. She closed one eye, looking towards the broken horn. She didn't want to lose at all, but she also noticed that the night had become faster. Then Karen wanted to launch the exploding sphere at the girl again, directing this magic towards Freya again. But Erna managed to notice this, smiling decisively, and placed a wall of fire in front of Freya, which protected the knight from the powerful explosion. The sorceress laughed, looking at the helpless Karen and saying that the magic that Karen was so proud of could not help against the urns. The girl looked at the sorceress furiously and clenched her teeth angrily. At this time, Pero moved again and began to quietly and quickly move towards the monster, who stood opposite the girls and told Erna not to get carried away by this and not to become arrogant. But then the boy swung his claws and decisively struck the demon in the back, which did not expect it, opening its eyes in pain. Karen flew to the side, looking angrily at the boy and thinking that now she had to retreat. At this time, Shinichi began to quietly approach Karen from behind, holding his sword at the ready, and the girl continued not to notice him, turning all her attention to the girls and Pero. Then the adventurer swung his sword and, with one confident movement of the blade, cut off the wings of the frozen girl. The confused girl turned to the guy and did not understand how and when Shinichi managed to sneak up on her unnoticed. Then the guy told her about the disguise skill. After all, Karen was so busy fighting Erna and Freya that she completely forgot about Shinichi's existence. The succubus was furious, looking at the guy and clenching her teeth, not understanding and confusedly asking the guy how he dared to do this to her. At this time, Pero, Freya, and Erna pointed their weapons at the demon, following her movements and surrounding her. Shinichi then said, pointing his sword at the helpless Karen, that the balance of power had changed again, and now Karen was left to accept her fate. Shinichi pointed his sword straight at an angry and hurt Karen who glared at him. She looked around, realizing that she was now surrounded by the adventurer's friends and the knight, who were holding her at gunpoint. The succubus clenched her teeth in anger and frustration, lowering her head down, confident that she could destroy them. The adventurer also noticed, looking at his skeletons, that his army of skeletons had also finished dealing with Karen's servants, who lay unconscious on the floor at the feet of his familiars. Shinichi said that the citizens were now freed, so the girl had to surrender. He looked at the tired succubus, still holding his sword pointed at her. But the succubus wasn't very happy with Shinichi's offer and didn't want to give up like a human, like an adventurer. She decided to use her magic again when the magic sphere appeared in her hand again. Karen detonated the sphere next to her, causing the stones to fly apart and the adventurers to cough. Freya and Erna covered their faces with their hands from the stones flying towards them, not understanding what was happening at that moment. Then Karen glared at the girls and promised Erna that she would definitely get rid of her next time, and then, waving her clawed hand, she said goodbye to them, after which she began to disappear with the help of her magic. Erna realized that the monster was trying to escape, after which Freya was ready to run after her and not let the succubus get far from them. Freya was about to attack Karen, swinging her weapon at the succubus with all her might, but she managed to disappear into thin air, not noticing the thread tied to her leg. The knight clicked her tongue in annoyance as she watched the girl who had run away leave, and then they looked around and noticed that they hadn't seen Shinichi. Karen began to appear in the empty corridor of the 27th floor, sighing with annoyance. She frowned because she was unhappy that the adventurers mistook her for a weak monster. All wounded, she began to slowly walk through the labyrinth, thinking that she could have gotten rid of them while the adventurers were sleeping, because, in the end, only the winner could laugh last. Shinichi began to appear behind the girl. Suddenly, a strange voice was heard, after which an adventurer attacked her from behind, swinging his sword, wounding her in the back again, causing the girl to scream in pain again. Karen was taken by surprise again, because she did not understand how the guy found her and managed to catch up with her. She fell to her knees, glaring at the guy who was silently standing behind her, and asked, not understanding how he could know where she was. Then the guy said that he used his web skill on the girl and tied the thread to her leg, teleporting away with the girl. Then he added that he was surprised that she didn't even notice his presence. She looked in horror at her leg, where the thread was tied, still on all fours, and then she coughed from her injury. Shinichi stood over the helpless and wounded girl, asking her what she wanted to say last. She glared at the adventurer, frowning her light eyebrows and clenching her teeth angrily, saying that she would destroy him. After that, the guy said that Karen no longer existed for people, stretching out his sword towards the succubus. And then Shinichi decisively swung his sword, bidding farewell to the demon, dealing her the final blow. He looked at the succubus's disappearing body, thinking that even though the girl was a monster, she looked like a cute girl, which made the guy feel bad about getting rid of her. The boy then extended his hand to choose a new skill for himself after defeating Karen, causing him to think while choosing a skill. Shinichi then heard someone calling out to him, asking where he was, and then looked towards the direction of the sound. The guy opened the map of the labyrinth, looking at where he and his friends were now and how he could get to them, after which he headed in their direction. After a while, he came out to his friends, calling out to Erna. Everyone looked at the guy, excitedly asking where he had disappeared to. Then the adventurer replied that he had teleported with Karen. He then smiled, telling them that Karen was finally defeated, and so her magic should break, freeing the people from her hypnosis. Erna was glad, clenching her palms, that Shinichi was able to do this, and Freya, smiling, said that she expected this from the guy. Pero at that moment only looked away sadly. Then Pero turned to everyone and said that he was unable to help them, although he really wanted to be like Shinichi. Shinichi then ruffled the boy's hair and told Pero that even an earthquake couldn't change the tides, adding and explaining that Karen was too strong for one boy. The boy then looked at the adult, asking if he would ever become strong and if he would be able to protect everyone then, hearing that he could do so, since he was a holy beast. Hearing these words, Freya was in real shock, opening her eyes and not believing her ears, which had just heard all this. Then the adventurer nervously looked at the shocked girl, realizing that they had let it slip. The knight did not believe that the little boy was a holy beast. Then Shinichi already wanted to calm the girl down, putting his hands forward, but did not have time to do so. Freya suddenly dropped to one knee in front of the boy, closing her eyes guiltily and saying that she didn't know she was petting the tail of a holy beast, so she sincerely apologized for her actions. Shinichi became nervous and put his palms together, begging the girl not to tell anyone about this secret. The knight then said that according to rumors, the holy beast was supposed to protect their country, warning her friends that if the adventurers did not report this to the guild, they could be severely punished. Shinichi then told the knight that if they returned and told the guild everything, Peru could be taken away from them. The boy then said he had an idea, inviting Freya to touch the boy's tail and ears. He then added that she could do this as much as she wanted, after which Freya froze. The girl closed her eyes and frowned, making a decision. Then she sighed and opened her eyes, slightly blushing from embarrassment, and said that she realized about the secret hidden behind the fluffy tail. Then Gale returned to them and approached the adventurer, calling out to Shinichi, who immediately looked in his direction. The knight was glad that they were able to get rid of the succubus, and Shinichi, sighing, said that they somehow managed to survive, smiling back at Gale. Then Shinichi noticed another person who approached them, looking at him carefully. Noven approached them, apologizing for all the trouble he had caused, but he was immediately told not to worry, because he had just been manipulated, so he didn't have to worry. Then Freya approached Noven, excitedly telling him that he had no idea how worried she was about him, and the boy guiltily said that he was sorry for what had happened. At this time, Shinichi addressed Erna, saying that they needed to bring all the citizens and skeletons to the surface. Erna was surprised to hear about the skeleton army as well. The adventurer looked at his familiars, who stood in a disciplined line, and then told them that he would send all the skeletons to work on his farm, and the girl only sighed, resigned to the fact that he had decided to take them with him. After a while, they returned outside the labyrinth, coming to the city. Then the residents sincerely thanked the adventurers for saving them, but Shinichi told them not to worry because he did it for his benefit. And when the rescued residents began to move away from them, going to their homes and business, Erna noticed that now it was peaceful again in Marn. And Shinichi agreed with the girl's words, looking after the departing residents. Then Gale approached the adventurers with a bag in his hands, saying that he had something promised. Shinichi looked at the bag with interest. Shinichi accepted the bag and then opened it, taking out one seed, asking what it was. Gale then said that it was fruit seeds, and since Shinichi had a farm, Gale prepared these seeds for him as a gift. Noven then turned to Shinichi, who turned to the travelers and said that it was time for them to return to the capital. Shinichi asked the knight if they could meet again, to which Gale smiled and said yes as they were about to leave. Gale waved to the adventurers and winked, saying that they could see each other very soon. The adventurers were a little confused by the words of their new friend, watching him go. Then Shinichi pointed out that they could now return home after such a mission. Pero raised his hand happily, and Ernoi was also happy about it because they could finally sleep. A few days later, Shinichi and his friends watched as the skeletons worked on his farm, developing and tending to the garden. Erna approached the adventurer, telling him to look at the vegetable she was holding in her hands. She offered to make a salad out of it, which might be tasty. Shinichi listened to the girl, who smiled happily, pressing a zucchini to her cheek and saying that the skeletons were really useful and it became easier for them to manage their affairs. Shinichi then remembered the seeds he had given them, asking if something had happened to the seeds Gale had given them. He extended his hand and began to summon a skeletal familiar, which began to appear from a magic circle drawn on the ground, after which the golden skeleton of Sket stood before him with a sickle in his hands, asking if Mr. Tanaka had called him. Erna looked at Shinichi in surprise, asking what kind of skill it was. He then replied that it was the skill Karen used to summon her servants, and so he decided to take the skill from her. Shinichi then asked the skeleton in the hat what happened to the harvest, to which his familiar replied that they worked tirelessly. The adventurer then asked about the seeds that Gale had given them, what happened to them. Then Skata said that they had just finished harvesting, asking if they wanted to try some vegetables. The adventurers were delighted that the plants had already grown and they could already try them. After that, the skeleton rolled a cart with a giant watermelon towards them, which surprised the adventurers greatly. Shinichi looked at the plant a little confused, surprised by its size, as did his comrades, who looked thoughtfully at the giant berry. Erna said that she had never seen such a big watermelon. Shinichi thought while looking at the big watermelon, and then he thought about what they should do with this big fruit now. The sorceress understood that they would not be able to eat the watermelon, just the three of them. Pero was also surprised by such a plant, continuing to examine it. Then Erna turned around and asked the glittering skeleton if he could eat the watermelon, to which Skata replied that their kindness was all that could fill their bones with strength. Then Erna said that Skata was being modest, and then suggested that they go to Marna, at which moment a noise was heard, from which all the birds rose into the sky, flying away from their nesting trees. The adventurers watched tensely as the birds flew away and screamed and did not understand what was happening. Then the ground under their feet began to shake, causing them to sit down on the ground, and Erna screamed in fear, looking at the ground. Then Shinichi warned that it was a big earthquake, which was quite strong. Erna, in a panic, said that they were on the 21st floor of the labyrinth, and what kind of earthquake could they be talking about? But after a while, the earthquake died down, and there was silence. Then Shinichi turned around, hearing the noise that the giant berry made. Suddenly, the watermelon started to roll out of the cart, falling right on the adventurers, who were not expecting this. Because of this, Shinichi and his friends started to run away from the giant berry, which started to roll at full speed and chase them. Erna continued to run, looking at the guy, and assumed that something could be happening above ground, since such an earthquake happened. Then, continuing to run in panic, Shinichi said that he didn't know anything about it, so they needed to go up and check what was going on, just in case. The skeletons watched with interest as their owners ran away from the plant, as Erna screamed that they had just finished with Karen and did not understand what had happened this time, because she did not want to get into Marna's troubles anymore. And all the while, they continued to run away from the giant watermelon that continued to chase them. Then Shinichi remembered the knight who gave them those seeds, asking how Gale could do such a thing to them. After some time, they went up to a city where life was peaceful and calm, where residents walked along the streets going about their business. Suddenly, another earthquake struck as they walked through the streets. Shinichi then noticed that the shaking on the 21st floor was stronger, suggesting that something was most likely happening underground after all. Then Erna also looked around and added that the city had not changed much since the last time they came to Marn. Then the girl gasped, looking at one point in front of her. Then Shinichi immediately asked about what happened. But the girl smiled happily and said that there were good clothes at the store with discounts, so she asked permission to look at the clothes, clasping her hands in joy. But then she heard her friend's negative answer. Then a girl they knew started to approach them and said that they had finally seen the Erna they were used to. The adventurers looked at her carefully. Erna's older sister approached the adventurers, with a silent little girl walking next to her. Shinichi looked at Ane with displeasure as she hugged her sister tightly, asking how she was. Erna then displeasedly told her sister to stop sniffing her because it was very creepy. Shinichi continued to watch the sisters, noticing that Ane was too clingy, Ane had changed since the last time she met her sister in the battle with the dragon, and he didn't think that was okay. Ani said that she was very worried about Erna, to which the sorceress, displeased, pushed her older sister away and asked her to leave her alone. Erna breathed a sigh of relief when she was able to get rid of her too pushy older sister. Then they were approached again, addressed, and asked for a minute of attention. Freya walked up to them, greeting them and saying that it had been a while since they had seen each other. Shinichi was surprised to see the girl smiling at the adventurer. Shinichi then said that the knight was supposed to be in the capital, to which she replied that she had an errand. She was told to find someone called Homeless. The boy wanted to know more about the task. Then Freya answered, telling him that the Duchess and Duke had instructed the girl to invite the homeless to the mansion, and the deadline was this day. Shinichi thought about this invitation, frowning. He doubted the girl's words. After all, he was just an adventurer with some power. Then Freya said that she wanted him to accompany her, pointing at the frowning adventurer. Erna became nervous and began to stutter from excitement because she did not understand what she was supposed to do. The sorceress also said that she did not have suitable clothes for the Duke's mansion. At this time, Freya took the boy by the hands, saying that she insisted that Pero go to the royal capital because the Duke wanted to meet specifically with the boy. Hearing this, Shinichi asked Freya with displeasure why the Duke wanted to meet Pero, to which the girl laughed nervously, trembling with fear, while Pero looked at the knight with boredom. Then Freya sighed and sincerely apologized, and then said that Gale had overheard their conversation in the labyrinth, so he learned about Pero, that he was a sacred beast, and after that the knight decided to tell the Duke about everything. Shinichi was stunned to hear this news, clutching his head in panic, realizing that Gale had stabbed him in the back, even though he didn't want to believe it. He was angry that after Gale overheard them, he couldn't keep it all in. Then he remembered the problem with that watermelon, promising that when he sees Gale again, he will fight him to the death, remembering his new friend. Freya then told the panicking adventurer not to worry, as this time the invitation was for the good intentions of the adventurers. Shinichi then replied seriously that he couldn't do anything to Freya anyway. After thinking for a moment, he agreed, thinking that he had simply come to the city to learn more about earthquakes. The adventurer recalled the recent events, including this earthquake and the holy beast, and realized that there was still a lot he didn't know, and perhaps this was a good time to visit the capital. The boy agreed to go to the royal capital since the Duke wanted it, for which Freya thanked him. Afterwards, she said that she already had a carriage prepared for the capital, so they could find her when they were ready to leave. Then she began to walk away from the adventurers. Erna did not believe it, and then said that she never thought that she could be invited to the mansion in the royal capital. Pero looked at the sorceress carefully, listening to her. She then suggested that there might be a lot of delicious food, imagining the beautiful and delicious dishes on the white plates that were on the table. Pero happily supported her suggestions when Shinichi looked at them with displeasure and said that they were too positive. Ane called out to Erna, crying, holding her arms out in front of her, beckoning her to hug her little sister again. She began to wipe the tears from her eyes, sadly saying that she thought that Erna had returned to the city, but now she was leaving again. Then she suddenly reached out to her sister to hug Erna, saying that even if they were far apart, their hearts would always be connected. To these words, Erna said that she understood her older sister, trying to push her away again. After a while, the adventurers were already riding in a carriage with 2 horses, which was purposefully heading towards the capital, and while they were riding, Freya again adoringly fell on Pero's tail, looking lovingly at the boy's fluffy tail. She talked about how fluffy his tail was, hugging him tightly, burying her nose in it, and then Freya added that she was glad she was alive. Then Pero asked Shinichi to help him, because the knight was stuck to his tail and did not want to let him go, to which the adventurer sighed and said that it was a furry baiting. Then Shinichi asked the girl to stop there, because if she didn't stop touching the boy's tail so interestedly, Pero would soon start to hate her. Freya quickly removed her hands from her tail and sat up abruptly, telling the offended boy that it was careless of her, and then quickly apologizing to the boy. At this time, Shinichi sighed, turning away from the scene while Erna was deep in sleep. And then he suggested that since they had achieved success in Marne, that was why they were invited to the royal capital, to which Freya agreed with the adventurer's proposal, saying that this was so. After that, she stood up and walked to the edge of the cart. Then the girl looked out of the cart, saying that the high brick walls of the city were finally visible. The carriage with the adventurers passed through the gates into the capital without any problems, and then they drove into the city itself. Freya said that it was the royal capital, where King Logus sat. At that time, the inhabitants of the royal capital were walking along the wide street about their business. The horse-drawn carriage began to move slowly along the crowded street of the capital, where everyone was busy with their own business. The adventurers looked at the locals. Some of them were discussing their business, others were going about their business, and someone was looking through something on a piece of paper, explaining something. Erna looked around in amazement and admiration at how crowded the capital was. Pero also added in admiration that all the buildings were so big, comparing them to the houses in his hometown of Marne. Freya told them that they could look around the capital later, when they had time, because they could soon arrive at the Duke's residence. Sitting next to her, Pero continued to look around the city. And, as the knight said, after a while they were already at a large and beautiful mansion, which looked very well kept and neat, when they got out of the carriage. Shinichi looked around and told the knight that he expected that the aristocrat's house was so big. Then Freya, condescendingly closing her eyes, asked to be allowed to speak, explaining that this was the second residence in the capital, and the Duke's main residence was on the family land, and it was even more spacious and luxurious. Shinichi then looked at the mansion appraisingly and said that he was amazed at how rich it was. He then asked her to share information with him. Then, frowning and looking sideways, Freya said that she would take them to the Duke's room. The knight then warned the adventurer that disrespectful behavior could result in immediate punishment, especially for Shinichi, to which the boy boredly replied that he would keep her warning in mind. Then the knight led the adventurers into the building, where a butler was already waiting for them at the entrance, greeting the people who had arrived. The butler smiled politely, asking them to follow him. Shinichi watched the man go, surprised that a butler worked in this place. Freya then told the boy that the boy needed to know a little more about the aristocracy. The butler then took them to the right room and knocked on the door, telling the Duke that Homeless had arrived. A man standing alone in the room, looking out the window, turned his head towards the door, hearing his butler. After that, the serious man looked at the people who came and introduced himself, saying that his name was Adel Madil, who was the head of the family, and then he suggested that Shinichi saved his son. The adventurers looked seriously at Duke Adel, who added that he wanted to express his gratitude, and then, if Shinichi and his friends didn't mind, he asked for the names of the adventurers to be revealed. Then the leader of their group, Tanaka Shinichi, introduced himself to the Duke first, looking straight at the Duke, and then Erna Frederia, smiling, introduced herself, saying that she was a homeless magician. After hearing the sorceress's introduction, the Duke looked away with a frown, thinking about the words spoken by the girl. Then he asked the girl whether the girl meant the Frederia he was thinking about, which made Erna freeze in fear. She looked down sadly, looking away, and then said that she hated to talk about it, but she admitted that she was Frederia of Santa Lucia. The Duke's eyes widened in surprise when he heard the sorceress's confession, and after a short pause, Duke Madil apologized, as he did not know that she was a duchess from a great country, to which the girl remained silent. Shinichi and Pero stared at their friend in surprise, because they had never heard this information about their friend. After which, Shinichi screamed loudly and in surprise at such a statement, to which Erna said that the guy was too loud, putting her hand to her head. Afterwards, they gathered and sat down at a table on which stood 4 cups of tea, from which hot steam rose up, after which it began to slowly disappear. Then the Duke said that the Madil family had the opportunity to meet the Frederick family, therefore, to find his missing daughter here, and Lord Frederick must now be delighted. Erna sighed, and then asked to stop talking about it. Of course, she could call herself Frederia, but then she said that she left home to become a great magician. The Duke then suggested that now was the perfect time to talk to her father and return to the house, which surprised the girl a little. Duke Adel smiled, and then shared that Duke Frederia had actually spent the night in his mansion. Hearing this, Erna pressed her hand to her chest in fear. She was a little surprised that her father was now in the mansion. The Duke then shared with the girl that he was sure that her father would be happy and relieved if he saw his daughter. The girl did not know what to do. She looked sadly ahead at the cups of tea, thinking about the words spoken by Duke Madel. Pero looked at the sad girl carefully and then told Erna that she looked pale. The boy then asked if the girl was okay. To this question, the girl nervously said that she was okay, trying to smile. After this, Duke Adel looked at the boy and turned to the sacred beast, who turned his gaze and attention to the man. The Duke then admitted that he had been looking forward to their meeting. The man smiled kindly at him and shared with the boy that he looked forward to the day when Pero could use his powers to protect their country. Then the sacred beast said with determination in his eyes that he would protect Shinichi and Erna. Then he wanted to say that he didn't care about the country at all, but suddenly a man's hand covered his mouth. Pero continued to hum into Shinichi's palm. At this time, the adventurer smiled, sharing that his stomach had been grumbling since the beginning, so he was wondering if they would have meat for dinner. Hearing the adventurer's words, Ducadel smiled and laughed at the boy's words, replying that there would be a lot of meat for dinner. He then added that he hoped that the adventurers liked their special dish. After a while, Shinichi and his friends were left alone. Pero and Shinichi watched as Erna stood by the closet, pressing her forehead against the door, and remained silent, clenching her hands into fists. Erna sadly shared with them that she never thought that her father could be in this mansion now. Then she said that she did not want to meet her father at all. The sorceress turned sharply to Shinichi, and then, putting her hands to her head, told him that she wanted to go back home, suggesting that they return to the labyrinth. Shinichi only looked at the girl skeptically, suggesting that she calm down. But the girl did not listen to the guy. She continued to panic, saying that she ran away from home in order to make herself a great magician. But if she knew that this could happen, Erna would never have come to this place. Shinichi patiently listened to all the girls tossing and turning, but then said that she was the daughter of a lord, and therefore he did not understand why she reacted like that to their upcoming meeting. At this time, a man was passing by their room when Erna shouted from the room that Shinichi did not understand that her father was not one of the best people. Hearing the girl's words, the man passing by their room stopped, not believing that he had just heard a familiar voice that belonged to his daughter. He approached the door carefully. Taking hold of the door handle, he pulled it towards himself, and then the man, looking into the room where Erna stood, turned her head towards the intruder of their conversation. The man entered the room. He frowned when he saw Erna. The girl turned pale and looked at her father with fear. She stood awkwardly in front of her father, feeling the cold in the room, and then said that they had not seen each other for a long time. The man closed his eyes in displeasure, making sure that his daughter was, indeed, in this mansion now. Then he turned to the door, saying that it was almost time for dinner, so he suggested that they talk at the table. Shinichi and his friends remained in the room in complete silence. Shinichi turned to the girl. He wanted to encourage Erna by saying that everything was okay, but he himself understood that nothing was okay. At this time, the girl was scared and worried, so she felt unwell. There were various dishes on the table, which lay appetizingly on their plates, waiting to be eaten. Adventurers and representatives of noble families gathered at the dining table in the spacious dining room. Father ate the dish silently, cutting off pieces of food and then throwing them into his mouth, while Erna sat awkwardly across from him, not even touching her food, and looking away at the table. After a while, the man turned to his daughter, who only remained silent, not saying a word. Then the magician asked where his daughter had been for all these 9 years, but Erna continued to keep her mouth shut, lowering her head as if she was guilty. Duke Medill then cleared his throat, pressing his fist to his mouth before he began to speak, putting down his cutlery. He then looked at his son, who smiled, and began to talk about how Princess Erna had saved his son with her superior magic. And then he added that this was to be expected from the famous Verderia family of Santa Lucia. In this way, he reminded us that Erna's father was also a great magician. Then Erna's father was surprised that his daughter used magic so well. It was strange for him to hear, because in his memories, Erna could only use elementary magic. Then Duke Metal replied that he had also received the same information from his people, but then added that it was Erna who had fought that succubus and defeated her. After hearing this from his friend, Erna's father frowned and sighed, as if he didn't want to admit it. Closing his eyes, he realized that his daughter had been developing her skills for 9 years, after which he said that he was happy for her. The girl continued to stare at one point, not touching her food, while her father talked about how he was going to return to Santa Lucia the next day. But when he heard nothing from his daughter, he asked if she had heard him. The girl remained silent, as if she was afraid to say something. Then her father said that she had done enough, and now she had good skills as well as free time. Shinichi, who also heard all of this, looked at his tense friend who didn't even make a single move, so he decided to speak for her. He apologized to Erna's father for interrupting him. Then he started talking about how Erna was a capable ally, and that's why the guy wanted her to stay with them if that was possible. Hearing the guy, Erna immediately looked at him. Then Erna's father answered him that he was not interested in the adventurer's opinion, and he also said that outsiders should not interfere in the affairs of the magician's family. Shinichi agreed with the mage on this point, but then added that Erna had left home to become a great mage, and so he asked the man to wait a little while until Erna had fulfilled her cherished dream. Hearing the boy's words, the man became angry, asking how the boy could consider himself his equal just because he was an adventurer. He then warned him, telling him to shut up if Shinichi didn't want to die by his hands. The man then said that he had serious doubts as to why such a humble and poor man as Shinichi was sitting at the same table with them. And when Shinichi was about to respond to the man's rude break, Erna stood up from her seat, stopping the adventurer from unnecessary actions, turning to her father. She looked at her father with determination, pushing her fear aside, and said that she wanted to continue being an adventurer. Her father didn't understand what she was even talking about. She was a daughter of the Federation, so she should know what it all meant. And, of course, the girl said what it meant to her, because in the end she would then have to marry into a royal or aristocratic family. But then she shared that on the day she ran away from her family home, Erna had made a vow saying that she would become a great magician. She then asked if, until that wish came true, her father could wait a little longer. Duke Medill looked at his friend, who frowned thoughtfully, and then, continuing to cut the food into pieces, he said that he was surprised that the girl, who had always been obedient, was now contradicting him. He looked at the girl sternly, after which he said that he still could not fulfill her request. The girl listened to her father, who added that he was not sure that his daughter could become a great magician. Erna got angry and continued to stand her ground, saying that she had grown up a lot since then. The man continued to eat his dinner calmly, noticing that his daughter was repeating herself, and he could not allow his daughter to continue being an adventurer. The girl did not want to follow her father's lead, saying that she would not give in, and even if she had to be stubborn, she would continue to be an adventurer. But the man interrupted her, saying that he would wait only a few days. He placed his hand on the table and then slowly stood up from the table, telling his daughter to use this time to prepare to go home. After which, the magician headed towards the exit of their room. The girl was angry that her father did not send the girl. Then she thought that it would be better if her father heard their story first. Shinichi looked at his upset friend, reminding her that her father had decided to wait a few days, so if they could prove her father that she could then continue being an adventurer. The girl then agreed with her friend, angrily cutting her food on her plate. She understood that they had time, so she wanted to make her father understand her. Shinichi sighed tiredly, saying that he could now continue his celebratory dinner, but then froze, listening to Pero furiously eating food with his hands next to him. He then looked at the boy in confusion, who looked at the guy and barked, still holding the piece of meat in his hands.